everybody. This is Cindy Allen, Editor-in-Chief of Interior Design, and I am here with my very good friend, the Executive Vice President and CEO of IIDA, Cheryl Durst. And we have a partnership that is meaningful and will help us move into the future. Cheryl, tell us about DesignUnity.
I'm so excited about DesignUnity because it gives us, IIDA and interior design, a true opportunity to have effect on the future of design, right? We live so much in the moment, and I think the conversations that you and I share about students, about emerging professionals, about everybody working now, completely vital, completely relevant. But I'm thinking about that next generation of designers, and DesignUnity is all about what we can do, kind of our aggregate power as a profession. So it's not about your brand, it's not about my brand, it's about what we can do together to support our industry.
And I have to say, I just want everyone to know out there, like Cheryl and I have known each other and been close friends in the last 5 years, let's say. And we have had late night talks about wanting to do something meaningful together. And we'd like, even a few years ago, we'd like try to stir up something, but it was always difficult. And it was only this year, with all the heartache and all the strife, we both almost at the same time said, oh, it's this. This is the thing, right?
Yeah. And it's that, what our collective power as women in this industry, right, and as leaders, and I think our ability to create some momentum. You use the word, there's so much hurt and heartache and pain, and companioning that are all these questions. I think people want to know personally, what can they do to affect change and access and equity in our industry? Not only what can firms do, what can product manufacturers do, but what can we as individuals do?
And Cheryl, I mean, you've always been a leader, and a Black woman who's a leader, like in our industry. And I've always felt a deep kinship with you, but I don't know what it's like to walk in your shoes. But on the other hand, having you as somebody who has done so much for our industry, it kind of only makes sense that you would lead in this way.
I can't not be me, if that makes sense, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so,
I know that.
So what I bring to the table as a Black woman, as a woman of color, I think about all the experiences that you and I share, right? As women, as leaders, we get questioned, right, about our ability. But I think about the way that I navigate the world. You and I inhabit the same world, we inhabit the same industry, but I have an abiding awareness that I need to navigate the world differently than you do, right? Than men do, than anyone. And I think it's vital for design and designers to understand, even if you don't live that experience, to understand that, there are communities that navigate the world and therefore navigate space, that navigate created space differently. And so understanding how we make those experiences relevant and meaningful and equitable is just critical to our future as an industry.
And as you said, like we really can, in the positions we're in, affect change. So it's hard, but that's the exciting part of it all, right? That hopefully, Cheryl, you and I will look back and say, oh, we actually really made a difference in a way that we didn't expect, like you asked us a decade ago, right?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Let's talk a little bit about you. So last week we celebrated Hall of Fame, and I inducted you in 2016. I can't believe it's gone so fast already, right?
4 years.
I know,
4 years.
It's like crazy.
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't know what was happening to you right before you got inducted. Would you share that story?
Sure. Short version, I was being trolled and harassed by someone who was sending me messages and emails and voicemails and repeatedly using the N-word, and essentially saying to me that I had no right to do what I did, to be in the position that I was in. We never found out who that person was, and it was kind of an interesting juxtaposition because that happened to me 20 plus years ago when I first became the CEO of IIDA. There was an anonymous letter that was left at IIDA headquarters saying that an N-word will never be the CEO of this organization. It couldn't be countenanced or stood for, and a whole bunch of words were spelled incorrectly. So, but it was that reminder that so many people who look like me, that there are folks out there who don't want to see us in positions of power and in positions of leadership. And my parents had always told me, you lead with grace, dignity, and intellect. And that's what I've always tried to do. It angered me, it saddened me, it frightened me.
Yeah, it was scary.
And I remember you reaching out. I had posted something on Facebook, which I use as kind of a soapbox platform, and I posted a story, frankly, and I hope that the person who was trolling me read that. But I wanted my community to know that hate lives amongst us. You know, we don't, you know, as much as we're in this bubble in design, we're not immune to hate.
Right.
And I wanted folks to know about it, but it made me, when you inducted me, it made me hold my head even higher.
For everyone out there, like at the time that happened to Cheryl, like I spend months sort of figuring out who I'm going to get in, who I'm going to induct into the Hall of Fame, because it's only 4 people every year, right? And so that was the week, that was the planned week of calling Cheryl with this amazing news. And then I see the post, and you know, and I was in tears, frankly. So I called you and I said, this is either the worst time or the best time. I'm not really sure. I would just remember that being a really special moment that we had together when I, you know, inducted you over the phone to get ready to induct you, right?
Well, in that moment, Cindy, it was someone out there so sought to diminish me and demean me. And within 48 hours, I had this phone call from you. And the most important thing you said to me was, I see you. And I fast forward to this moment that we're in now. And equity is so much about people being seen and people being heard. And the fact that that award, that was the first time that you all had bestowed a leadership award. So you were acknowledging my leadership in the industry at a moment where I was demoralized and felt so low and questioned myself and my ability. And those 3 words, the power of those 3 words, I see you. And then to fast forward, you know, to that moment on stage and standing then at the Waldorf in front of 1,500 people, and to be able to tell my story and to have 1,500 people see me and hear me. I wish everyone out there, that every single person who has felt diminished could have that feeling of being seen and heard. It's validation, and it's so critical to who we are as human beings.
Yeah, I just got chills thinking about it all. And by the way, like, okay, she like freaking brought the house down. Can I just say, you know, so loved and so respected about what you do. You know, meanwhile, there's so much more that we can do for others, and certainly in healing and moving forward and bringing people together. We always talk about community, so there's more community that we want to bring together.
Right. And I think that so many moments in our community as design, we have to continue to push those boundaries of opening those moments, so that, you know, all of those young designers or middle-aged designers, I don't care how old you are, so that you feel seen and heard and celebrated and validated. And that's why I think that conversations that we will have through DesignUnity will be important to collect and gather those voices. I think the continued celebration of the work in your magazine of the diverse community of designers. I think of the little 8-year-old young, you know, little girl or little boy who doesn't even have a word yet for what they want to be, but it is interior design.
Yeah.
and for them to see the work and to see the faces and to hear the voices of designers who look like them. So that pipeline is so critical. And we all have a responsibility to that pipeline. I don't care what color you are, but we all have a responsibility to that pipeline because of all those communities who don't even understand design. And I'm really excited about kind of our joint action item, what we're calling the Talent Collective.
Right.
And it's a way for IIDA and interior design. I hate the word aggregate, but I'm going to use it. It's a way for us to aggregate and convene and gather talent out there that hasn't traditionally been exposed to the magazine, hasn't traditionally been exposed to opportunities. I'll have a super honest, real moment for you, kind of post the George Floyd video. I heard from so many firms saying, okay, Cheryl, can you help us we want to find Black designers. We want to find brown designers. I don't know where to find them. And, that was very real and honest in the moment. And we all know that our folks in the industry need to maybe rethink where they're recruiting and how they're recruiting. But the Talent Collective was born to kind of gather talent and expose them not only to job and employment opportunities, but opportunities to share their portfolios, to share their CVs with the magazine as well, so that you can continue to celebrate diverse talent, but also so that diverse talent can have increased opportunities at firms or with product manufacturers. I'm really excited about the Talent Collective and the fact that it was born of this conversation about what can we do.
I couldn't be more excited to be doing with you, frankly.
Yeah. It's, all the stories that can be told about our profession, about design, and about being strategic, about supporting humanity. And the more voices that tell those stories, the more expanded design has become. What design does best is illuminate, right? It illuminates the good and the wonderful, and it illuminates sometimes the not so good. But we need to see it, because in order to solve anything, it must be seen.
So we have like this kind of amazing day together, right? We're going to kick it off with SCAD. And so SCAD asked me if I would host Pass the Mic for the Latinx community.
Wow, that's fantastic.
So our Latinx panel represented, listen to this, Brazil, Mexico, Guatemala, and Costa Rica. Kind of amazing talent doing, making change in the world, frankly. But then we're going to follow up with you, my dear. So we have our documentary that we did in 2016, and then we followed up after, right?
That's right. And, the conversation that you and I had, and it's funny looking back, even though it was just 4 short years ago, I kind of looked at myself and I'm like, how naive were you? We didn't know what was coming. Right? Obviously, we didn't know what was coming with the pandemic of inequity and the pandemic, the health pandemic that we're living with.
Right.
But I remember in prepping for your being in Chicago to do that video, and then later for my acceptance speech. And I remember it was the first time that I said in public that you can't design for the world if you're not of the world.
Right.
And, I've always been such a firm believer that designers have to be so expansive in their thoughts and their beliefs, and in the work that they do, that we can't afford to be sheltered as a profession. And obviously in regard to diversity, but also because the world doesn't understand us as a profession either, right? They see design as a luxury and not a necessity. We all need to do a better job of telling our story.
Right. And I have to say, Cheryl, like for anybody out there who's going to watch the video, we don't talk about the things we're going to talk about now. And it, like you said, it was a different time.
But I thought it was important to stand on that stage as a Black woman and show joy and pride and dignity in that moment.
And then on our DesignUnity panel, oh my God, Cheryl.
What a group. What a group. They're, they are friends and family, which I love. But we had George Bandy, globally recognized sustainability expert, Gabrielle Bullock, with Perkins and Will, Karen Compton with 83K Consulting, Gisu Hariri with Hariri and Hariri, who's just such a mentor to so many. And then, of course, Dina Griffin, architect of record for the Obama Center, and who also did the Modern Wing, and just a dear friend.
Yeah, she's amazing. And then we had Mike Johnson from Perkins and Will in DC. We had our young gun who was so positive, Crystal Lucero, amazing. Yeah. And then, of course, our big heavy hitter and the loveliest guy, actually from Cuba, Carlos Martinez. And then Mavis Wiggins from TPG, who everyone adores, who got a big leadership award at the IIDA.
Yeah, amazing. Such an amazing group. It was an honor to get them all in one place.
It certainly was.
It wasn't easy to get them all in one place, but such an honor to have them all in one place and to have such a candid, open conversation with them.
It was. And once we got them all together, they didn't want to leave. And that's always a good sign too.
Which means we absolutely need to do a part 2.
Exactly. So part 2 is coming up in 2021. But meanwhile, you got to stick around and watch all day DesignUnity, partnership with Interior Design and IIDA. Cheryl, I love you. God bless you. And let's help the world a little.
Yeah. Brava and onward, Cindy. Onward.
Yes, absolutely. Right.
And I love that we're doing this together. So
me too. Together for the good of design and humanity, for sure. Okay, so everyone stay tuned. It's a full day. It's coming up right now. Right now, we've got a nice trio of emerging rising stars that I'm very, very excited to share with you. We're going to start with Clarice Semerene, founder of Studio Clarice. Is it, how do I say that? Clarice?
Clarice Semerene.
Semerene, from Brazil. And then there's Marisol Centeno. She's the founder of Marisol Centeno, a studio in Mexico. Hola, Marisol.
Buenas, ¿qué tal, Cindy? Hello.
Buenos dias. And then we have partners, which is also a very interesting topic for all of you. And they met outside of school, or they met in school and then they worked. Well, they'll tell us. And it's Greg Melitonoff and Inez Guzman, founder of Taller Ken. And they have studios in both Guatemala and Costa Rica and New York. So we have an amazing group. And I can't wait to share them with you. Remember, everybody, this is a gift for you today. And I want you to listen in and be inspired. We know these are tough times, and we really want to share this talent with you. Okay, you know what was really interesting? First of all, you guys, if you stayed from the beginning, you met my art director, Carla Lima. So Carla is Brazilian, and Clarice is a friend of Carla's, and that's how we connected. Clarice, I'm sure the students are going to be very, very interested in how you got started, and also the fact that you're in New York, but you also do projects in Brazil, and that kind of connection to your roots.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for the invitation. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, SCAD, and thank you everybody that who is listening to us. It all started in Brasilia. I was born and raised in Brasilia, and it's an iconic modernist city in Brazil. So to grow up in this amazing environment helped me define the designer that I'm today. And so from a young age.
Clarice, you said it was like kind of like a modernist playground when you were a kid growing up, right?
Totally, yeah. It's kind of a surreal place because it's different from any other city in the world. And to be in this environment, to grow up in this environment, I had a strong curiosity about the architecture and the universe behind those windows. And I wanted always to visit my friends but mostly because I wanted to see their apartment, their home, how it was inside. So I always developed this curiosity, and also since I was a kid, I already draw floor plans and sections. So it was very natural. I was already an architect,
Yeah.
and I didn't know.
Yeah, Clarice,
And
let me ask you, Clarice, having Oscar Niemeyer, did you, let's talk about Brasilia and Oscar Niemeyer, and, it was outside your backyard in a way. So did you know how famous that was, and what kind of influence, global influence he had on the world of architecture?
actually, only when I was older, I realized what my city is. But when you are born in an environment like this, you don't realize that. You only think that it is your universe.
Right.
I mean, when I met a regular city, I thought it was super weird, because Brasilia, it was normal for me.
And what about being a woman architect? What was that like?
I mean, to be a woman architect, doesn't matter where you are, you have to work harder. And to be here in US, I'm not only a woman, but also Latina, so I have to work even harder. But at the same time, it was easy for me to keep working remotely when I moved to New York. It started when I finished my studio started when I finished my master's in Italy. I moved back to Brazil and I started my studio. And so it was in 2011. So it's been 9 years developing residential and commercial projects. And then 5 years ago, I moved to New York, and the initial plan was to stay here for just 2 years, so my husband could finish his master's. And so at the beginning, I was very worried about I was worried about losing my clients in Brazil because of the distance. But then I realized that it was a plus to live here because I have access to so many inspiration in art and design. And actually it's a plus to the clients, so that I have this access.
Clarice, you at some point you realized, oh, this is an advantage, right? Because there are students who are thinking, how did she make that happen? So you were continuing to work on the projects in Brazil and then starting to get to know people in New York?
Yeah, actually, I realized that I've been working remotely since the beginning of my studio, because even when I was in Brazil, I was working from home. So I love to work from home and to have this flexibility to have projects in other cities in Brazil and have my team in different cities. So actually, I was already doing it. So I just kept doing it here. And it was easy and natural to just keep on doing it. But of course, there are some tools and methodologies that you have to, strategies that you have to develop to enable you to do it in the best way, right? Because it's not so simple. And one of the things that I think it's easy for us is just because we are a small studio. And it's we have a very artisanal approach and very human-centric approach. So it's easy for us we have one client at a time. So it's easy to work very closely with the client, in collaboration with the client. And so it doesn't matter where the client is. I'm gonna use tools to help me extract this essence and see through the client's eyes. So many times I don't even visit the location. I never met the client in person. But what I do is, instead of doing just one briefing meeting. I do 5 briefing meetings, and I do, for example, exercises and surveys, so I can understand deeply this client, and then I'm able to translate it into space. So I think it's very important to have a human-centric approach.
Yeah, so just so students out there, this makes a lot of sense. And you just heard Hector, who has a lot of clients, but you start one at a time. You start one at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And as Clarice is saying, she's made it happen. When you think about the pandemic, she's been doing it remotely all these years. She was completely set up for that, which is fantastic, Clarice, right?
Yeah.
You're such a great example. I want everyone to know this is your home studio. Where is this one?
This one is in Brasilia. Is a studio. Is a graphic design studio, and they used to work from home, and so they wanted a studio that you have these domestic vibes. Yeah. So I use a lot of domestic elements and a lot of solutions to optimize the small space. And yeah, it was and I used the colors of their studio.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So I want to tell everybody. So like Carla, my art director, and she's we're always looking for talent. And she said, there's somebody that I know who's very talented. We always look for great talent, but we don't look for friends of friends. We just look for great work. That's just the way it is, right? Mm-hmm. So she kind of, was shy about, but she knows what I'm going to, she knows what I'm going to like. And she shows me this project, which then we published. And it is that like very light hand that you have, and the way you separate spaces that is very interesting. But this was just published, you guys. So here's this, again, you saw it in the first project, and now you see it again, this kind of screening that you do.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Carla, and actually when I moved here to New York, as I said, we were planning to stay just for 2 years, so I was just worried about keeping my clients in Brazil. But then I started to connect with this community, this Brazilian community, and things started to happen. I mean, even people I didn't know before started to helping me, and Carla is one of them. That's why I have this connection with you. Yes. And also my first project in New York was also because of this connection in this community. So I think it's funny because in Brazil we don't remember that we are Latin Americans, because we feel a little bit isolated from the other Spanish-speaking countries because we speak Portuguese. So, but when I moved to New York, I realized that yes, I am a Latina, and it was great to see how the community help each other, the people help each other, and everything started to happening like naturally. And
that's great advice. That's great. It's a great observation, and also really good advice for others too. That you really felt embraced, that you found a community, and you're not just isolated. I mean, there's definitely a Brazilian community. I have really good friends at this amazing Filipino community, but it's not just that. You find the support in one another, right?
Right, and the Latinx community is not like monolithic. It's very diverse.
Right.
But we find some things in common and help each other. So it's really great. I feel I immediately felt home when I moved to New York.
I love that. I love that. Yeah. Now there is an important project that I want you to share with everybody, the hospitality project. So tell us how that happened.
Yeah, that happened also because of, I mean, they felt that I was the right fit for the project, but there was a friend of a friend who recommended me. So It is an existing building in Chelsea. This building it used to be Americana Hotel.
Right.
It was designed by 10 architects, and it was a renovation. I was responsible for the interior design, and I had the opportunity to work with a great team with very talented professionals from different disciplines. So I worked with furniture designer from Mexico, other professionals from Panama, Colombia, and also Americans. And so it was great to share different visions and a diverse team and it's something that you only get here. This kind of experiences you only get here in New York. I mean, in Brazil, my city is, my hometown is not big, so I mostly do residential projects and small commercial projects. And here to have my first project in New York, a hotel is very, I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah. Now, Clarice, this is also a really good message for the
Mhm.
students out there, which is that you were trained as an architect, but your success, and also something that you love, but not necessarily what you thought about in the beginning, is that you're getting a lot of work as an interior designer or interior architecture maybe too, because you do create architecture in those spaces. But that seems to be an advantage for you, right?
Yeah, actually, my master's is in interior design. I studied in Milan, and I always liked this scale of detail. But maybe in Brazil we are more focused in functionality and efficiency of the space, and maybe because we have a modernist tradition that is very strong. But when here in US, I noticed that when you design a project, you are interested in telling a story, and so it's very important to be focused on the curation of the furniture, art, and everything works together, and you create a cohesive narrative. So I learned a lot in this sense, and now I'm also applying this knowledge in my projects in Brazil, and it's very important to create a cohesive story.
How often are you?
And emotional design.
Sorry. How often do you try to go back and forth? Like, what's your schedule like?
I try to go to Brazil once in a year, but now with the pandemic, I don't have plans to going back anytime soon. But it doesn't, it's not a problem for me actually. When the pandemic started, nothing changed for me very much because I was already working remotely. But now I see a lot of other architects. They are starting to see that it's possible to work remotely, and I like to say I've been in quarantine for 9 years.
Right. You're like, I know this. This is no problem. I know this. Yeah. Well, yeah. Clarice, do you have like a kind of a final thought that you, and we'll bring you back at the end, but a final thought, we're going to move on to Marisol, just about, a student coming out, of school, graduating right now, and really how having your history has been actually a positive in your life.
I would say not to be afraid of using your life experience and your heritage to find your own voice, your unique voice as a designer. And also, I think don't be afraid to ask for help in your community. I mean, and also, of course, don't forget to help other people that need to be need your help, right? And I think it's what happened in my experience, and that's my message.
Yeah, no, somebody was asking, but another Carla was asking, but it's true. Like they're saying, like transitioning into a new culture for the first time, or moving to a new country. I love what you said. You have to ask for help. You have to find friends. In your case, you found there were other Brazilians that were reaching their hand out to you and helping and supporting you. But that group was also very diverse. So it wasn't like you were only staying with your own, what was familiar. You were able to branch out and learn from others as well.
Yeah. I mean, actually, I wasn't expecting anything from. I mean, I was just trying to work with my clients in Brazil, but then you have to trust that things will start to happen if you connect with other people, and you don't have to be like super anxious that you're not enough, or that you have to be like the others. And no, you have to, I think you have to embrace how you are different from the others, and find people that have things in common with you.
Right, exactly. Okay, Clarice, many thanks, muchas gracias. And what is that in Portuguese?
Muito obrigado.
Muito obrigado. And we'll see you in a little while.
All
and
right.
then, hola Marisol, how are you? So Marisol Centeno, founder of Marisol Centeno Studio in. You're Mexican. Where are you, in Mexico City? Where are you, Marisol?
Yeah, I'm in Mexico City right now.
Right. And Marisol has also a unique voice, and somebody who's developing product, and also the artisanal approach, and everything that you learned by living in your town. Tell us how that developed.
Well, first of all, hello everybody. Thank you very much for the invitation. I am happy to be here. And well, it's about how I made a studio and be living here. When you invite me to this conversation, I was reflecting about, at that moment in which I was a student, I was looking for my voice and personal statement as a designer. And for sure, growing up in a multicultural country like Mexico, built by Afro-Mexicanos, mestizos, and several indigenous cultures, influenced my idea about collaboration and diversity relevance in my work as a designer, Cindy.
Yeah, and we talked last week, and I was just so impressed by you, and also just that you're courageous and you have a strength. And I think the students should know that having, you may not always believe in yourself, but start, just kind of start. So tell everybody how you took that step that took to another step.
Well, after I finished my studies on textile design, I found a job at one of the biggest textiles factory in Mexico, designing apparel, for low-income families. And soon I discovered that during that time in Mexican textile industry, there was no time, how can I say it, for design and innovation, and spending hours designing low quality, mainless products. I don't know, it was very complicated because everything I dislike about the textile industry really was like just there. But it was an amazing also opportunity, because after I resigned this job, I start to question the role of design in Mexico culture, just as that. And I make me several questions, as how can I use design as a tool, or what would it take to create methodologies for better like human practices, or how can design find a better dialogue with the industry and craft in my country. And I don't know, I was extremely curious to understand the qualities and difficulties of handmade products in Mexico and their stories behind. So this is how my studio Bijou started as a specialized brand in designing textiles.
What was the first? Was it a carpet? Was the first thing that you designed, or like what was the first actualization?
Well, actually, as a Bijou, I always start designing rugs.
Right.
And I choose rugs because actually it's like a, I don't know, random story, but when I was 15 years old, I made an amazing travel to Turkey with my sister. And I had the opportunity of discover these amazing artisans in the middle of the desert, weaving beautiful rugs. And it was like a masterpiece for me because what involves to create a rug is like complete and unique textile design process. And since that moment, I fell in love with this idea of creating homes just with textiles.
And through your older connections with that big textile manufacturer, did you find your way to the artisans that helped you start your business?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, I always been like very romantic, to be honest. And, you know, I strongly believe that design and innovations are like tools through which we can create beauty, but also positive impact on the lives of our collaborators and, I don't know, suppliers, clients. And I think that it's quite interesting now how the conversation, it could open to also to the industry and believe in these new worlds, utopians. I don't know if it's naive, but I think it's possible to mix the best from the industry and the best from craft. I mean, why not? No, so Bijou at the end is formed by a creative and like interdisciplinary and multicultural team. And in these connections, for sure, industry that collaborate this time with us are very important to create, for example, new threads or implement stuff related to dye process to implement in the craft of Zapata community in which I've been working there during the last almost 10 years now.
Wow. Yeah. So how many craftsmen are working in your company?
Well, it's interesting because now at this time, I mean, we collaborate with Zapotec productions managers. So people from Teotitlán del Valle now, they're not only involved in the artists, in the textiles process, they are also production managers. But I mean, thinking about weavers and dyers and women that are also involved, we collaborate with around 25 artisans, but we have like two principal leaders family that, I mean, they're like, yeah, my right hands, no, for sure. And
look at the studio students, look at the studio and the people and the process. It's so beautiful, right? And I bet it's also exciting that when you're designing something, when there's something that has a heritage, but it's more traditional, and now you're turning it on its head, right? That's the thing that's so satisfying.
Yeah, and I mean, I really enjoyed this idea of to collaborate with a horizontally team in which there involves also, I don't know, like Luisa and Mexicans, designers from Mexico City, and now we are also collaborating with Indian artisans. And something that I really enjoyed is how this multicultural way of communicate and work together is related by design. I mean, something that always take us together is the possibility to create by using textiles. And that diversity, I trying to reflect it in my products and in the way we work to create new ways of collaborate by using design.
Right, so we were just showing all of the rugs, but then you are collaborating with many folks in completely different ways. I do want to share some of this. Maybe you can take us through some of this.
I couldn't hear you. Could you repeat me?
Yeah. No, just that it's become bigger than just rugs, and now you're collaborating on many different types of projects. And I love seeing the weaving in these. this wall, is this a wall hanging? I love it. Like I want it. It's fantastic.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, this collaboration, it was very joyful. It was a collaboration for Cartier flagship store in Mexico, and Cartier commissioned us like a special textile intervention. And it was a challenge because Cartier was looking for a local approach and experience for their new flagship stores. But of course, we have this challenge of fusion the Cartier values. So it was a very interesting point to also see how the Mexican design is developing and how like handmade process could be transformed and collaborating in many different ways. So yeah, I enjoyed very much that project.
I'm glad you said that, because you wouldn't think Cartier, you wouldn't necessarily connect the two. And I love that you said that, you know, understanding a brand is, you know, when you want to collaborate, you have to understand the brand and find a new way, and sort of probably pushed you to find a new way.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know, it was a mighty, I mean, people know that I am very related to my culture and locality, but I think that's, I mean, it's very interesting how in these times we can be local, but also global at the same time, and take the best of local and best of global, and look for, yeah, like a balance around about that.
Yeah, I'm moving into another project. So why don't you take us to this one? It's also gorgeous. Is this a rug or a wall hanging? What is this one?
Wall hanging.
I love wall hangings. Not body soul.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, this project in particular, it was a very experimental one because there were like just one edition pieces, and I mean, they were made for a corporative space, but some of the principal objects of this, it was to create an experience of design and collaboration with in a women community of an indigenous community in Chiapas, Mexico. So we were exploring how things change by scale and color by using embroidery, and we create like different narratives in abstract and modern language. But it was a very joyful and playful way to collaborate with them.
So there's a student asking, but I know the answer. The student is asking where you're sourcing the products, but you're making them all. Is it hard to source the materials for the product?
Yeah, actually, some of the challenge that textile designers confront in Mexico, I don't know if even other Latin American countries have, but Mexico, I mean, we don't produce high quality fibers. So sometimes it's a very challenging work to have all kind of fibers. So that's why collaborate with the industry help us a lot to find and develop what we need. But yeah, mostly, for example, that handwalking was made in our textile design studio with my design teams. You know, something very fun is that during the last years, many textiles students from different countries like join our internship. So there was a moment in which Chilean and Indian and French girl were working together, and so multicultural idea.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Way.
What is this one?
Well, this is a very particular collaboration that we made with a contemporary artist, Antonio Macotela, and contemporary art gallery Labor. And this is like my first contemporary piece collaboration. It was very challenging because it was a jacquard piece, and it was huge.
Yeah, it looks enormous. This is part of it, right?
Yeah, we have to assemble several long pieces of jacquard, and you know, the engineers that open us the possibility of collaborating with these industry places. It was challenging because we were like playing, and it took a time to develop it. It was challenging, to be honest.
Yeah, but you're so interesting, like scale, you know, materials is an issue, and then scale is an issue because you're hand making all of these things, correct?
Yeah, mostly. And you know, every time I start a project, I really feel a special connection of how textiles join architecture and space and how textile could transform it. So every time I start a project, even sometimes when I talk with my husband, he reminds me, don't complicate it. Please don't make huge things, Marisol.
Right.
And I always, I don't know, I think it's part of my statement or way of see things.
Yeah, it does seem very architectural. You definitely have an architect's eye. But it's interesting. You keep saying we're playing, and a lot of the work is really, really joyful. I want to make sure we get. I want to make sure they see, and I want to get to the Cooper Hewitt too. So let's see. What is this one?
That's pieces when I won a special cultural government grant from Mexico, and this project called Para Espacios. And the idea of these textiles was to how the pure of textile could dialogue with the light and white. And so we were experimenting how the light talks with these textiles, and it was more about that. It was more like an editorial and experimental project in which we figure out many interesting stuffs also around the beauty of the textile. So yeah, it was 1 year of experiment with plants and light and white. How can white could be transformed by light?
Beautiful. Marisol, somebody's asking, and Andrea is asking, or Andrea Cisneros, hi, hola. She says, how is your community approach to these artisans? I wonder, does the community kind of know about you two right now?
Yes, I mean, you know, it's interesting because our point of view with the relations that we create with our artisans it's long terms. And beside this area of product development, I think that B2 is created by two areas, like a strategy design, which is focused in development, new solutions and new ideas to collaborate with this diversity. And for example, in this area, just for give you an example, last year with the Tecnológico de Monterrey, which is a very important university in Mexico, we developed like a special machine to wash and improve the carbon of our production. So, I mean, when I talk about artisans, our point of view is to create a long-term relationship. And every time when people ask me how do I relate it with them, I mean, they're like a super professional artisan. So it's like if I was working with an engineer, and all the process, costs, and the way we work, it's an open information for our team. So as a social design brand, these kind of processes are open. And yeah, and as I told you before, now several artisans with I have been collaborating during these last years, they are improving and learning more stuff, and now they're managers or like, you know, managers from some departments of B2.
That's amazing, and we thank you for that, for encouraging that. Look, Marisol is celebrating her culture, you know, 100%, and then spinning it on its head, which is what I know all you students want to do. And she is one person who's making a difference. So like think about that. You have just there's a couple of special editions. I did want to get to them before we get to Tyre Ken. So tell us about, so you're collaborating, you're designing things that no one's ever done before, using new materials, and then you're doing collaborations, and then special editions. Oh my God, Marisol.
Well, these pieces is, it was a commission from Cristina de Leon, a Latin curator from the Cooper Hewitt Design Museum. And I mean, you know, as a designer, I never imagined that moment that the Cooper Hewitt was going to buy a piece for their collection. And I mean, for example, now that you're asking me about the team, this was a very collaborating piece because I was in charge of the investigation and develop concept, but also with Luisa, a textile designer from the brand, and Lorenzo Bautiza, Leti, my artisans team, we worked together and developed this piece because we were weaving with silk and baby alpaca and with a several like high quality process. And you know, it was a challenge because also the textile committee of the museum was very, very tricky and heavy. So, I mean, yeah, we enjoyed very much these pieces. This piece is still at the Cooper Hewitt in the nature exhibition. So I don't know.
That's
You
beautiful.
can see it over there.
Yeah, congratulations for that. Yes, go to the Cooper Hewitt when you can. It's in New York, if you didn't know, and check out that piece from Marisol. There's one last. Tell us about this project, the circular rug.
Well, this is the Pitaya rug, and it's a collaboration for Hotel Esencia, which is a very beautiful hotel at Tulum in the Riviera Maya. And I don't know, they have this approach of modernism and story of Mexican modernism. And we were looking for a concept that embraced, like, you know, these tropical and amazing flavors that we have in Mexico. So we were playing about the idea of fruits, of tropical fruits, and this experience of color. You know, if you take a look of our work, colorful, it's very important to bring experience to the places. So this rug is on sale only for Hotel Esencia, and they also sell them. But I mean, we really enjoy to collaborate with architects and interior designers to bring to their space experience and textures and colorful joy with our products.
Well, you certainly bring a lot of joy to us. And I also want to thank you so much for really being proud and celebrating your culture. It's really special. Okay, you're going to come back, okay?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Marisol. And if we could get Tayer Ken, so if we could get Greg Malitonov and Inez Guzman, I hope Inez got her Wi-Fi going, if they're around. Well, hi, Greg.
Hi, how are you?
Oh my God, Inez, it's working. All right. So just wanted to tell everybody that partnerships are really special when you find a good one. And I would love for you to tell us how you guys got together, because it's a good story.
You want to start, Greg?
Sure. So thank you, first of all, for having us, and we've really enjoyed listening to some of the other presenters. Ines and I'm from New York City originally, and Ines is born in Guatemala and raised in Costa Rica. And we both met at the office of Renzo Piano in Genoa, Italy, working on a big museum project for the new Whitney Museum in downtown New York City. So we both met in his workshop and lived and worked in Italy for 3 years on that project before we kind of opened our own office.
Okay, can we just say what a big deal that is, right? Working for Renzo Piano, there could be students out there that end up, because, you know, globally, and have the fortune to work for one of the greats. So congratulations on that. And then that's how you met, which is amazing. Were you pals then?
We met there, and we were commuting every day. We lived in Genoa City, but the office, Renzo's office, is a little outside. So we were commuting 1 hour every day. So that was the time where we started doing other things aside from Renzo's office, because 3 years on the same project can be something. Can be something. And well, that's also part of our beginnings, that commuting time.
Yes, and that's also something good for folks to know. So if you're working for a big architect, you might be working on a project for 3 years. And I always have so much empathy for you guys, because, you know, making a magazine, we do it every month and we see amazing projects, but it takes a long time. So, so Greg, so tell us what happened. So you're doing all this commuting. What's happening on this? You got this side gig going on.
Well, I think we started looking around us as well, because we were also traveling on weekends and really fully embracing that like first work opportunity outside of school to not only really invest ourselves in the work. I mean, we really felt like we were part of a bigger family in the office, but also kind of taking every chance to go around and see all the amazing architecture and design that Italy offers. So we're really sponging up a lot of creative input, and then that naturally started bubbling to the surface where we were really looking for an outlet, either in projects that Ines was doing back home, or by kind of doing our own little installations just with collaborating together with some of the other young people from the office.
And Ines, so was that Guatemala at the time? Was your home was Guatemala, right?
My home at the time was Costa Rica, but projects were popping out in Guatemala because fortunately I have then connections in both.
And so what were they asking you to do?
More retail related things and interiors. So that was also very exciting for me because with Renzo it's very much architecture.
Right.
And then this was a completely different scale of things, furniture, door handles. So that's how it started.
And would you say, because you like it says that there's like a playful approach, but you learn serious architecture, and that is probably a very good DNA for you then to be able to do things that are a little bit more open and relaxed. So was that a good experience for you to be with Renzo, Greg?
Oh, I mean, absolutely. I think it's we were very fortunate, and also very fortunate to see a lot of young people go out into the workforce, and they don't, sometimes their project stops, or you know, they're just put on competitions that the office doesn't win, or something to this extent. And we just got very lucky that the project we worked on was quite prominent, and also actually ended up going through, and as a result, it was also fast-tracked, which meant we got to see all of the stages in a very abbreviated calendar. It's almost like someone hit fast forward on the project button. And so we got to really just quickly see how a project goes from concept to construction in kind of an abbreviated time. And so after that, there really was nothing else left for us to do except to go out on our own. Maybe a little bit naively, but
no,
at the time.
No, I love that. So tell the students about that. So Greg, you're from New York. Inez is from, are you from Guatemala or Costa? You're from Guatemala, right? So was that, I mean, what did that mean to you guys? It ended up being a huge benefit, right?
Yeah, we always talk about this because for some reason, like working in New York is really hard. Yeah. And they were mentioning that before, but in our countries, many things were starting at the time, and design was also a new thing, and that opened up for a lot of opportunities. And this fun part of it is also because there's less of a formal process of construction, less legal, less paperwork, so to say, and it allows for the project to be more playful because you're resolving more on site and with the client, like experimenting. And at the beginning was, oh my God, what's this? I had the Renzo mentality, and then where? But we needed to get out of it, otherwise it wouldn't happen, the project. And it was a great lesson for me.
Right, great learning, and then also, like you said, trying to really develop your own voice and your own aesthetic, which you guys definitely do. I do this project. Tell us where this project is, because it's really, really great. So I'd like you to walk through it.
This is a mall in Guatemala City, and this is an interesting one because obviously this was designed, like the entire mall, to be coherent, and the stores should respect all the facades and the signs should all be the same. But a client was like, no, we're at the end of the mall and we're only renting this space if you allow us to do something different. And we were like, well, we just need to pop out of what's existing. It was a little controversial with the architect of the mall, but they allowed us to do it. Yeah, the idea of this project is to the place is very cold, so we needed to make the space more cozy, more small, but also to attract people's attention. So how do we sort of like pop out of this space visually, but also the space inside should be smaller than the scale of the.
You literally popped out, right? You literally popped out, and it's fantastic that, first of all, that you found a client who said do it, that it was probably, like you said, in the right spot so that you kind of got the okay, even though they were like, what are they doing? But this is such a fantastic project.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna go to the next one.
That's colorful.
Yeah, that's colorful, Greg. So tell us about this one. Is this one also in Costa Rica?
This one is in Costa Rica, in kind of an upscale area of Escazú. It's an upscale suburb, and this one's really interesting because it's and it's odd that I'm the one talking about it, but it's a all female clothing boutique brand that really tries to highlight women in design, women. So Ines was really a big part of a team, which also involved local women artists, local women clothing designers. And this was an existing building as well, but we kind of used color and added volumes to the exterior to kind of create this sense of like stacked, playful, colorful boxes. And then each floor has kind of a different palette because the ground floor is more accessories and the middle floor is more casual, and then the upper level is more formal. So everywhere there's a kind of a riff on different palettes with different special moments.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And so you're working on these projects. These are kind of big projects, right? And do you say, because you're bi-coast, I mean, you're still in New York, Greg, and Ines is there. And what's that conversation about, just in terms of, wow, this is developing into a brand?
That'd be nice. Yeah, it's interesting because we work, I think when you have a partnership, it's important to try to both find room for everyone to breathe and to have their own voice within the partnership, but also to kind of, maintain like you said, a kind of an identity, because if everyone kind of goes in their directions, then you sort of, you wind up with two separate portfolios essentially, or work that doesn't talk to each other. And I think we both have kind of like a red flag goes up when it's like, oh, this is, this would be better if you were more involved. And I think we're always, we have kind of a constant flow of communication. Even if one of us is running the project, we have kind of a constant flow of communication, so that someone is always keeping an eye on how the thing is progressing. And it also allows for somebody to be almost a little bit neutral, so they can weigh in at critical moments. You have that trusted circle to go to, so that when you don't know what's best, you know who does. And I think that's a very hard thing for designers who work solo, because sometimes they only have themselves to look to. And that I've also been in that position where it's just like, I just don't know. And you kind of have a way of freezing up or spiraling. So,
right.
Yeah.
And Greg, what is it like for you, American born, and maybe especially now, like that you're working in, it's kind of cool, right? You're working in Inez's culture, but that you're finding this collective voice together in a time where we want to celebrate each other.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's been really eye-opening for me. So sort of to pick up where the story left off, when we started working, I had never been to Latin America whatsoever. And so my first visit to Guatemala was also seeing our first construction site. And that was really it's been an extremely enriching experience, and one that's really broadened my horizon. But also it's been very interesting to bring the work kind of back to the US, towards a kind of more familiar context, and just see a lot of resistance also about the way people, once they love the work, but once they see that it's mostly done in Latin America, they kind of throw up their guard, because it's a little bit, they have presumptions about the quality of the work or what one can expect from work that comes from a Latin culture. And I find that that's been really surprising, but also at the same time, it has allowed us to be kind of a bit of a differentiator. When working in New York, things tend to veer towards minimalism and kind of a stripped down palette. And so the kind of bright, happy, refreshing attitude that I think your audience has probably seen a lot of today, it feels very refreshing. I mean, that's as we've kind of been part of young architecture community, we're always being told, people, oh, your point of view is so refreshing. It's like a breath of fresh air, and it's and for us it just feels natural because we have this kind of blended origin. It's
so beautiful to see that partnership, Inez. First of all, I want you to tell us about this project, which, by the way, matches my ring, and I'm wearing the ring because I bought it at the SCAD store, and it was this fantastic artist who doesn't do these rings anymore. So students out there, if you know the gal, let me know. I need more. But it matches this incredible story. So talk about joyful. Like, look at this, and architectural. We were talking about your ring in the chat before we came into the talk. SCAD.
I've been totally distracted by it.
I had to, because I'm like, if anybody knows who the artist is, apparently she's not doing the rings anymore, but she's got to change that. Anyway, tell us about this beautiful project.
So this was actually our first project in Guatemala. So that's actually where we started, this one here. And it's a very simple commission. They told us, well, we need a pergola, which is an outside space with the roof, with natural light. But then there's needs, like, okay, you have a translucent plastic roof and you need to cover it from shade and the noise, and how do we make it special? And of course, there's all this amazing artisans doing amazing things in Guatemala, and we wanted to go to the root of it. So this is the way they dye thread that will become a textile. So if you go to certain parts of the country where they do this, you see all the roof terraces just like this. I mean, we just brought it like this, except that we chose a palette and an order. But basically, it's a housing factory. Like, you go to the houses of these artisans and go to the terraces and you see this. And it's been fantastic. This is a project from 2014, I think. And it's still the same.
Wow, it's amazing. Okay, I want, everyone's going to come back on in 1 second, but I do want to give you a couple minutes to talk about this other piece of your work, which is really giving back to the community. This is like just an amazing way to end and then bring everybody back. But apparently, so you do a project every year that's like kind of a nonprofit, right? And let's tell us about that. Or Greg.
Yeah, so every year we invite 10 to 12 students down to Central America to do a public space intervention from concept to construction in 3 months. It's completely run by the participants. Ines and I just act kind of as leveraging our network and our experience to make it happen. Because we do feel there's a bit of a disconnect between the kind of energy and enthusiasm students have for their own design work when they're in school, and then they kind of hit a roadblock if the right work opportunity doesn't present itself where they're really allowed to kind of express themselves. So we wanted to put them in the driver's seat and kind of harness all that design intelligence that's kind of cooking for all those years at all these great schools, and also use it as an opportunity to blend because maybe your school is almost regional or whatnot, but we kind of bring people regardless of age and level and location. So we have designers from China, India, Italy, Spain, Mexico, all coming to one location and working together and kind of pooling their knowledge to execute a community engagement project for the public good. And that's all done with crowdsourced funds and donated materials. So it kind of has a different approach to the business model of architecture and design as well. So we've done this every year, and now we've sort of, because of COVID, we've expanded the program. So now we're running sort of different parallel teams, which is really exciting to take it sort of to the next level.
This is so inspiring. By the way, the stripes were unbelievable. You definitely had an Abbey Road moment there, didn't you?
Yeah.
But is this the last project that you've worked? I don't know if it's in the right order.
Yeah, so the one you have on the screen was the last one, and that was actually done, the one with the poles was actually done by a SCAD student as part of the team. Cheryl came, and by the end of it, she was, using a metal grinder to cut rebar, and sorry, I think it's like a steam pipe, but gonna explode behind.
Amazing. By the way, I was looking at, so if we look at the logo of SCAD, this makes a lot of sense to me because there's like the colors there. Well, what a beautiful, meaningful way to end. And I'd love to bring everyone back on for a second if we could. Can we? And Bernardo, can you come back on? I want to end on this beautiful like Abbey Road moment. It's so cool. Isn't that amazing, you guys? You guys are unbelievable. And you all seem to me somehow connected, like a beautiful woven tapestry for sure.
Yeah, it's very refreshing to see so many colors. I love their work, and I love Marisol's work too.
I know, amazing. And like this to me is like the representation of what I say that we look for at the magazine. You know, when SCAD asked us if there was, Latinx talent, we came back the next day. We had a huge list because we just look for amazing work and amazing design. And it happened to be Latin. That's great, but we really want to honor all the colors of the rainbow, which are sitting right here in front of us in this beautiful, beautiful nonprofit. What is it called, guys? What is it called, the project that you do every year?
The Fundamental Design Build.
Oh, Fundamental Design Build. Okay, I want to thank the students. Listen, being in a pandemic is no fun for anyone, but not being together is definitely a hardship. But that is where greatness comes from. Challenges is where you find the will, and hopefully you see this amazing talent and it inspires you. I don't know, I want to be on one of these projects, you guys, don't you? So listen, a big thank you to SCAD, and Paula, I love you more than words can say for what you do for the students. Students, keep going. We could do another one of these. I'm all for it. And guys, I hope you guys find new friends that we shared today. You all are amazing.
look at the world as a designer's laboratory. I'm observing what people do and how they do it, and somehow being able to take that knowledge, bring that back to IIDA, and turn that into content that designers can use. Every human experience happens in a space that's been created by a designer. That's huge.
Please welcome to the stage the Executive Vice President and CEO of IIDA, Cheryl Durst.
Design, by its very nature, elevates.
I am not a designer, but I often speak about design. For so many people, they know they love design, they're not sure why. It's taking what is a little bit mysterious and making it real for people. Winston Churchill said, never speak to an audience who knows more about the subject than you do, and I do that all the time. Grew up in Toledo, Ohio. My dad taught at the University of Michigan. My mother was a microbiologist. I wore braces, glasses, and orthopedic shoes. I was just a semi-precious trifecta of dork is what it was. As a child, I was a profound stutterer. I loved words, but they didn't act right when they fell out of my mouth. But when I was writing, I became this other self that was confident and graceful. I honed my writing. So I spent my summers writing in corporate communications. I wrote about pickle tanks, and I worked for a hospital for 1 year. I had to dress up like a bear. But that sense of taking language and using words to influence and inform and inspire, and I find myself using influence, inform, and inspire when talking about IIDA. This is such an interesting moment in time, in design, to be talking about authenticity. It's an economic issue, it's a fair trade employment issue. Students invariably ask me, how did you get here? Right. It wasn't a succession of, I had a 5-year plan, because I've never had a 5-year plan. I said yes to a lot of things that retrospectively just made sense for me at that time.
Here we are. Ooh. Hi, Neil.
I knew Cheryl from Washington, D.C., from the Design Center. She was doing education and professional development. And I thought that's exactly what we need to reinvent a design association.
I said yes.
You said yes.
There was a decision to bring in an executive director of IIDA.
At that time, we were $1 million in debt, so we had no money. We had to go back out to our members. We know you've already paid your dues, but oops. Can you give us an extra $100? And they did. I learned the value of transparency and, again, telling the story.
It was a tough time in terms of the catharsis of the organization.
Right.
To turn that ship around isn't so easy, but we were relentless in the things that we were going to do.
And that's when we contrived the 3-word strategic plan for IIDA, which is knowledge, value, community.
We were really interested in raising the bar of interior design practice.
The relationship between IIDA and AIA, I can't say it really even existed. Or to me it didn't, because I wasn't friends with Cheryl yet. Design is such a collaborative process.
Right.
And I think that's finally being celebrated, not resisted.
On that corner limestone, that's where our name is.
That's super cool.
Yeah. Being in architecture, you know, we do interior design, but I wasn't engrossed in it, and I got back in it because of Cheryl. And then she requested that I be on a jury for IIDA.
That was one of those great projects, because I remember the jury having the discussion, where does architecture end and interior design begin? But it was less about that than the perfect blur of the two. I'm a firm believer in celebrating design. We are celebrating beautiful, effective, efficient design, as well as the people who are creating it, and the clients. We have 12 international design competitions. And then all of our chapters have their own programs. 40 weeks out of the year, I am not in Chicago.
I don't know how she does it. I see all of her posts, and she's traveling from city to city. She's making everybody feel important. She's listening, and she's spreading the gospel of design.
What projects have gotten an IIDA award?
The Chinatown branch of the Chicago Public Library is in this amazing neighborhood where it needed to be a community center. It's beautifully designed by SOM, and it has really transformed that community. The Gratz Center was designed by Todd Heiser from Gensler, and again, it's become an incredible gathering place. We all know that design is people-centric, but I think this message of putting people first, particularly in community buildings, is one that resonates with the public. Every design community is incredibly different. That inconsistency a little bit in our profession, we call ourselves different things, and we started having the conversation in IIDA about having a research agenda and having a content agenda. Everything that we create needs to be beautiful.
Yeah, you need to communicate design, no matter what it is.
Always, and it's a point of pride.
Well, look at this, you guys.
Perspective has been around for 40+ years. It is this really beautiful thought leadership piece that talks about the business of design. Having something tangible that is beautifully designed. I'm a paper junkie, so I always love to feel the paper. I'm always interested in what it...
I knew you were my kind of gal.
Yeah. We're moving. IIDA is growing and expanding.
In the MART, they've been kind of tucked away and you couldn't really meet them. Now they're actually given this amazing view of the city, and it also lets the entire community be a part of it.
If anyone ever told me that I would have a job for 20 years, I would have told them that they were crazy. Like, that's for old people.
But that's because it's rich and exciting and always changing.
And always changing. And there's always another challenge.
What makes Cheryl so special is that she has been sort of the backbone and really the spirit of building IIDA.
There are actually two words that come to mind. One is bold, and the other is audacious.
We all take it for granted in a way that she's there, but she's been the mastermind that has pulled all this together.
I don't know where designers would be without her leadership.
By celebrating design, when it's in the pages of a magazine or on the stage of a theater, we're telling our story. It's the story of society. It's the story of culture. And I'm not gonna lie to you, I love being the person to tell that story.
Hey everybody, this is Cindy Allen, Editor-in-Chief of Interior Design, and you've just watched a mini documentary that we filmed a few years back. And certainly a lot has happened to Cheryl since then, the IIDA, and the world. I am honored to share my good friend, the brilliant and beautiful Executive Vice President and CEO of IIDA, the one and only Cheryl Durst. Hi, Cheryl.
Hi, Cindy. How are you?
Oh, I'm good seeing you. What can I say? And Cheryl, it's interesting. The documentary brought me back to when we inducted you into the Hall of Fame, and it's very telling and sort of right on the topic right now. Is that the entire industry of our profession was there, 1,500 people standing there cheering and honoring you as a leader. And it gives me chills just thinking about that.
It was an amazing moment, and it allowed me to use that platform to say some things, good things, but instructional things about our profession and about our community and about equity and about diversity and about the importance of what design needs to be aware of. And it was as relevant then as it really is now. That was an extraordinary moment. And, you and I share that same belief that we can use our platforms, whether it's a magazine, whether it's an association, to uplift and invigorate and sometimes be a little instructional and sometimes nudge a little bit.
Definitely.
And tell our community sometimes what needs to be heard.
Yes, definitely. Yes, I mean, you just wrote a beautiful letter to the industry, and it was about those things: humanity, dignity, equity, justice.
Justice, yeah.
Yes, it just went out, right?
Yeah,
Yes,
it just went out. And it really was, and I think it's so important for us, particularly in this moment where people are agonizing, not just over the situation, but we all have an activist that lives inside of us. And I think some of the frustration that people are feeling, they want to do something, right? They want to be activists. They want to be the verb.
Yes.
So we want our community to be the verb, but people are frustrated because they don't know what to do. And they're reaching far and wide. And the purpose of that letter was to remind designers and the design community that the tools of activism are what you do every single day.
Exactly.
Design is an act of optimism and an act of activism. And the power of design to reveal and illuminate and elevate and dignify the human condition is more needed now than ever before.
Absolutely. And I think in many ways, we're just so lucky to be in a position to be able to communicate all of that to our industry, and also in a positive way, because you're like such a, you're such a positive leader in our industry. And I like to think I am too, but like, we believe in that.
Yeah. Somebody emailed me last night and said, how do you stay so positive about the state of the world and the state of the profession? Because we also know that right now in this moment, so many of our community are dealing with layoffs and looking for new jobs. And, all of this happens in the midst of a freaking pandemic. And in this industry, how can we not be optimistic?
Right. I think that's in our DNA, right? Our whole industry, it's in our DNA that we'll get beyond it, that we'll be better. And there was something really interesting that your dad, I guess your dad and your mom, it was in this speech that was so beautiful. And they were encouraging you as you grew up to always be better, not necessarily right and not necessarily righteous, but not like anybody else, to be better.
Right. And whatever your better is, find your better. Right. And, I think that's a lifelong journey.
And, Cheryl, like, I feel so much like love and respect and admiration for you. And, we kind of joke around that we're kind of like sisters, but you are going through something that's extraordinary. And yet you are a leader that can just be this beacon for people.
It's so, as we were looking at the letter and the words, right? We're in the business of words.
Right.
And how do we communicate this optimism? And the only lens I can communicate through is my lens as a Black woman.
Mm-hmm.
I've been one all my life.
Yeah, exactly. It's not going to change.
It's not going to change. I don't know how to be anything else. And it's that moment of sharing that with other people and not having it be a burden or anything traumatic or difficult. It's been interesting because people have been so wonderful and they reach out and, they're giving me virtual hugs and they're saying, oh, Cheryl, we feel for you. And it's like, I've lived an extraordinarily privileged life. Yet I've dealt with so many of the things. I've been diminished. I've been reduced. I've been called names. There are opportunities that I haven't been able to participate in because of the color of my skin. But you get up in the morning and you put one foot in front of the other and you continually try to be better and encourage those around you. And I wanted to find a way to send that message out because it so applies to design. Design is a profession that has been diminished, has been reduced, is not looked at in always the best ways. And so the parallels between my life and the life that I lead as the CEO of this organization are so closely connected. And so this is heart and soul to me.
Absolutely. You know, and everything you're saying, it really touches me. And then there's like sort of the other side of maybe the work. An amazing project can be from anywhere in the world. And we want to always share that. So that's kind of our community that we feel so strongly about, right?
Right. We just celebrated the winners of our interior design competition, of which the magazine is our media partner for that. Right. And, a part of that competition is the Wilching competition, which is for and celebrates firms of 5 or fewer. But in the entire interior design competition, it doesn't matter if you're a firm of 3 and in the Ukraine, or you're the world's largest design firm, with thousands of employees. It's about design excellence.
Right.
And it's always so energizing and gratifying to celebrate great design, to celebrate those great projects, but the teams that create those projects, because then they're creating those projects for people, for humanity, regardless of who is going to enter those projects, live in those projects, work in those projects. And that's, design has no barriers or boundaries.
No, it doesn't. I mean, I always like to say, it doesn't matter where it's from or who made it. It just has to be great design. But I love that the awards has that special Wilching Awards.
Yeah, that has always just been that very special moment. And there are increasingly so many more firms over the past few years. We've seen the entries for that particular portion of the competition just grow. There are so many more firms of 5 or fewer. Increasingly, those firms are led by women, and we are just seeing stellar work come from that.
Right, it's amazing. And by the way, I only just shared it with her, okay? but a winning project made the cover, and yay! And so we're really jazzed about that, really excited about that. So Cheryl, I want to talk about the IIDA, and there was something that actually resonates more now than ever, which are the core values. And sometimes it's like, oh, core values. No, these are the core values of IIDA. And the first one is diversity and equity and inclusion, community support, and network. And then being a valuable resource.
And being a valuable resource, absolutely. It's such an interesting, this is the only not-for-profit job I've ever had. I came from the product manufacturer side of the world, worked for the Merchandise Mart, worked for the Washington Design Center, worked for Knoll. And this idea of being in this organization that is dedicated to people and a profession, much like you, you've got your readers, but then there's also the entire community of design.
Yes.
Yeah. And this ability for design to talk about empathy and from a behavioral standpoint and an attitudinal standpoint, it's always people first.
Right.
And, that's always been our mantra at IIDA. It's always members first. We support the individual designer in their pursuits, whether they're economic, educational, professional pursuits. The industry has gone through so many changes and incarnations, and it's the increased escalation of value and importance, the realization by the client community that design is a necessity and not a luxury.
That's right.
It keeps me coming back every year. I can't imagine doing anything else.
I agree. And, the designers, for anyone who's not a designer, we know they are almost the definition of humanity, so passionate, so caring, so giving, overly giving, to their client and their ideas. And so at the heart of where we sit, it's just so meaningful right now, don't you think?
Yeah. Well, and it's, in that letter, I referred to design as the ultimate optimistic act. It's also the ultimate altruistic act, because if you ask a designer what they do or what they desire, it's always about making something or some place or someone better.
Better. There we go. back to your dad. Back to your dad.
Yeah. It is understanding the affect that you have and the lasting affect. And again, that's what makes design so timeless, is the lasting benefit that an individual or a collective has on a space or a place. And I'm not leaving out graphic designers or product designers or fashion
You
designers.
love them too. Love them. Big love. Big love.
Yep. All the disciplines are invested in making something or someone better, leaving it better than you found it.
Right. And we've been saying this all along during COVID, that we're going to help get everybody onto the other side.
Oy, COVID.
I know. My
Right?
God. We're not at NeoCon.
You know, I know there's a virtual aspect this year, which is wonderful, but replacing that face-to-face connection, I think next year when we're all back at both NeoCon and probably Salone as well,
Right.
It's going to be amazing.
No, it will be. Now, since the video, you've moved into a gorgeous space.
We have.
By our good friend Todd Heiser at Gensler.
Right.
And
right.
so that's given you more room to actually do more events and bring more people together.
Right. We really multi-purpose that space. We've got the office side where my team, there are 25 of us at IIDA headquarters, a staff of 25. And the other side of the office really is the space that we rent out to groups and organizations to meet. And that becomes a whole other interesting conversation post-COVID, is what does the world of gathering and convening and meeting look like? But it's that space has so come to symbolize what IIDA is. You know, it's eminently warm, and it's a gathering space, and it's the, you know, array of materials and textures and textiles, very touchable. Again, all the things that we need to rethink in a post-COVID world. I did a survey of my team just to kind of evaluate where everyone is and how they're feeling about coming back to work.
Yeah, what they say.
One of the top responses, because one of the questions, what do you miss? What do you miss now that you're working from home? And obviously everybody misses their colleagues.
Yes.
But Team IIDA, we miss our office.
Love that. Space is healing. Space in the community makes people feel good. Yeah, that's wonderful. I mean, it is a kind of gorgeous space.
It is kind of a gorgeous space.
Hello.
Todd and Team Gensler did such an incredible job of interpreting our purpose as a design organization, and as folks who work there, we so gravitate toward that space.
Let's talk about the members. Are you seeing positive shifts towards more diversity, towards more of the values that you so believe in?
Yes, slowly, incrementally, right? And so much of it, I've taught a couple of classes for SCAD and for K-State. And so, you know, the virtual classes for design students. And where we're really seeing diversity evident is in the classroom. There are more and more Black and brown students entering into design programs. And the goal is to keep them there. And so we're so grateful to people like John Nelson, who created a diversity scholarship for African-American students, and for IA, who has a diversity scholarship, because often there's an economic gap that needs to be met and satisfied for those students to keep them in school so that they can get through those programs. But we're definitely seeing more and more diversity in programs. Anecdotally, I hear from so many students that they were introduced to design as a career via watching HGTV, because they've seen other people of color actually practicing design. And so that representation piece, love it or hate it, whether we love or hate HGTV, it does offer opportunities for students of color to see, for young people of color to see practicing designers who look like them. And then when you see that someone who looks like you practicing a viable career, it's like, oh, I can do that. So we can't ever negate the power of representation.
We've both also been to SCAD.
Yeah.
It's so wonderful to see young people so excited about design. Also in schools that are so designed, you know, it's like it's the best example.
And so those students really do see design as an act of activism. If you think about kind of their generation, so many of them are interested in healthcare design. So many of them are interested in what design can do to help eradicate homelessness, and what design can do to affordable housing is a major. So many students were doing capstone projects and thesis projects around affordable housing, climate change and the environment. And so they're gravitating toward design for all the wonderful things and reasons that people gravitate toward design, but they see it as a force.
They're being thrown into the thing that they were most interested, but in a very difficult way. But on the other side of it will be something even more meaningful and strengthen that. And those young students, my hat's off to them.
I know we're in the midst of a crisis, but I think the design profession is not letting this crisis go to waste.
No, I don't think so either. So listen, how can we all continue to be a great advocate? And even for all the designers out there.
They can have conversations right now with their clients. Designers can talk about people and the human condition probably like no other profession, right? And there are very few designers who have degrees in human resources or degrees in social psychology or cultural anthropology, but design is so invested in the human condition, and designers can so eloquently speak about what people need in terms of, yes, the physical space, but in terms of community and how we relate to one another. And so a young designer said, I really want to talk to my HR director about an affinity group, a group for Black women in our firm. And I said, so do it. You can do that. And I think we need to not be afraid to use our voices and use what we already know about the human condition to bring that to our firms, to bring that to our clients, to bring that to end users, to dealers, to kind of everybody in our gene pool.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that designers are more prepared for that than they know.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, exactly. And that was kind of the purpose of my letter, is that activism is starting with what you know. You don't move to something that is difficult or uncomfortable or foreign to you. You use the tools that you have right in front of you. And again, I think if we use the design process and design thinking in rethinking how we relate to one another, it will help in kind of eradicating what we know as racism, because we've got to break down the boundaries and the barriers. Designers don't design for Black people or white people. They design for people.
Exactly.
And can we apply that to how everyone relates to one another?
Listen to Cheryl. She knows. She knows the deal. She's your amazing advocate. And there's so much love in our industry and so much goodness and humanity. Let's get it out into the world and share it, educate people, as you say, bring the next generation up, and let's make positive changes through design, which we all love.
I love when you say go forth and design.
Right.
And I think it's a great reminder for all of us that in this period, in this difficult period, pandemic and everything else that's going on, we endure, we survive, design lives forever. And we need to hold on to that and remember that. And so go forth and design, and creativity is never canceled.
Hashtag go forth and design, for sure. And listen, Cheryl, I love you. All I wish I could do is give you a real hug. A virtual one's going to have to do for now.
Yeah,
but,
it'll happen. It'll happen.
Yeah, I love you so much. I have so much respect for you. And you're an amazing leader for our industry right now, more than ever.
Thank you, Cindy. Thanks for all that you do. Thanks for all of your support, the magazine and Sandow's support of IIDA. It's invaluable, invaluable. Thank you.
Good. Love and kisses. Hey everyone, this is Cindy Allen, Editor-in-Chief of Interior Design, and welcome to a very special program, the kickoff to a new initiative to promote positive change in our industry. Now, first things first, I am not the sole host of this roundtable, and I would normally never relinquish the mic, but instead I am honored to share the role with my dear friend, the brilliant Executive Vice President and CEO of IIDA, Cheryl Durst.
Hey, Cindy.
Hey. Cheryl and I are passionate and compassionate leaders who frankly give a damn, right, Cheryl?
That's right.
And together with our collective mega brands, Interior Design and IIDA, are excited to announce a new partnership championing racial equity, diversity, and inclusion in design. And we're calling it DesignUnity. Right, Cheryl?
That's right, Cindy. This whole conversation started because you and I felt the need to do something together. Right. And the events over the summer and the collision of the pandemic with the pandemic of racial unrest, you and I wanted to figure out a way how we could galvanize the industry. But we both recognize the importance of, particularly within equity, that it starts with a conversation, because conversation is all about being seen and being heard. And I just love the fact that this, at 3 a.m. in the morning, we talked about the importance of human beings relating to one another with stories, personal and professional. And then look at who we've gathered.
I know.
Join us in this conversation.
Kind of amazing. All right, kick it off. We're going to go back and forth, Cheryl, okay?
We're going to go back and forth. Should we start with some introductions? So let's start with my friend, George Bandy. Hey, George.
Hey, Cheryl, how are you? Hey, Cindy.
Hi, so nice to see you. And then we also have Gabrielle Bullock. She's the Principal Director of Global Diversity at Perkins & Will in LA. Hey, Gabrielle.
Hey, Cindy. Hi, Cheryl.
Hey there. And we have Karen Compton, who's the principal with A3K Consulting. Cheers, Karen.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And then next we have Gisu Hariri, co-founder and creative principal director with her sister Moshgun at Hariri and Hariri Architecture. Hey, Gisu.
Hi, everyone. So honored to be among such amazing, amazing designers.
And from Chicago, hometown, homegirl, Dina Griffin with IDEA Interactive Design. Hey, Dina.
Hi, everyone. It's so great to see you.
Next, we have Carlos Martinez, principal at Gensler. Hey, Carlos.
Hey, Cindy. Hey, Cheryl. Hi.
Hey there.
Thanks for having me.
And from Washington, D.C., Mike Johnson, Senior Associate with Perkins & Will. Greetings, Mike, from a town where a lot of stuff is happening right now.
Unfortunately and fortunately. Thank you, Cheryl and Cindy, for having me.
And we have, the one and only Mavis Wiggins, Managing Executive and Studio Creative Director at TPG Architecture. Hey, Mavis.
So happy to be included in this group. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, Cheryl. Love you guys. And thank you, everybody. I know all you guys.
And hey, don't forget Crystal, Cheryl.
Yeah, we can't forget. Here she is. So I'm going to shout you out a little bit for being our youngest panelist member of this roundtable. Crystal Lucero from Austin, Texas. And Crystal is with Edwards Mulhausen, where she is a senior interior designer and just doer of all good things and a powerful woman in her own right. Cheers, Crystal, and welcome.
Thank you, Cindy and Cheryl. I appreciate you guys so much.
So nice to see you again, Crystal. So Cheryl, we had talked about getting the whole group to get to know each other as well, right? So yeah, why don't you kick it off?
Right. Well, how about designers are storytellers, right, Cindy?
Yeah.
And I think what we'd love for each of you to do, recognizing, we don't have a lot of time, but if you could give a thumbnail sketch of who you are and a little bit about your journey, how you got to this moment. And I want to tee up with you, George, if you can start us off. Opelika, Alabama,
Hey.
A guy from a small town, and you're now a leader in sustainability, a globally recognized leader in sustainability. How'd you get from Opelika to here?
Well, I had a few scholarships to play ball, but my father went to Morehouse and he said that's where his money was going. So I ended up attending Morehouse and was in the reserves and served in Iraq. And when I came back from Iraq, I had the privilege of going out to the West Coast. And being in the West Coast, I attended a Natural Step conference where Paul Hawken and Amory Lovins and all the norms that you might know across the platform were there. Fortunate enough, there were two gentlemen there that actually recruited me to go and become the sustainability officer for the University of Texas in 1993. Actually, it was a little bit before it was popular. And so I had the privilege of kind of learning on the job and working on a couple of lead projects with Reeves Taylor from Gensler, who was the campus architect at the time, and Brian Yeoman and John Pareto. And while in that role, met Ray Anderson on the President's Council for Sustainable Development. And Ray recruited me to come to work for Interface as their VP for sustainability. And I did that for 16 and a half years, and then moved over to Mohawk, where I served for 3 years. And now I'm working as a consultant on several other projects. But during that span, served as also the chairman of the board for the United States Green Building Council. So I always have a hashtag on some things, and Cheryl laughs at it. I said, just one man from Opelika. So privileged to be here as the only non-designer and a practitioner of sustainability, and serving in a capacity to support this team, and just honored to be on the panel with you guys. So thank you.
Gisu, tell us your amazing journey.
So hi, everyone. I'm actually an architect, business owner. I have a firm with my sister, Mushkan Hariri, and I was born and raised in Iran. And I came to United States in 70s, in 74, 75, to attend college for my higher education. And ended up at Cornell University School of Architecture, and did a Bachelor's of Architecture professional degree from Cornell. And then came to New York City via a year or two traveling in California, working for a few firms actually in San Francisco, spending time in the Zen Center in San Francisco, and kind of learning how to tap into my own inner voice, if you will. I realized that the School of Architecture gave me a lot of tools in terms of thinking and conceptualizing. However, I had very little knowledge in terms of construction and building, and I was not going to remain a paper architect and wanted to build. So I packed up my stuff and went to actually Arizona and worked, a few months with Paolo Soleri near Phoenix, building structures and kind of learning how to use tools and what it involves in creating all this, beautiful things that, I had in mind to build. And so that's kind of my journey from one part of the world to this part of the world. And so I just wanted to also share with you, because of the background difference, coming from Iran, which was a pretty much gender secluded. I went to a school with all women, and the thinking that I had was you come to United States where the dreams come through and where you will find equality and equity in both genders. And to my surprise, there was none of it, at least at the time being at Cornell and at the architecture program. So that's hopefully something we're going to get into later on.
Yeah, and it's something that you and your sister have struggled with your entire career.
That's correct.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's, Dina, you're a woman, you're an architect. Tell us a little bit about your journey.
Well, I wish I could say it was like everyone else's. I think the only thing I have in common is that I worked at Perkins & Will only for about 2 years, but my path to architecture was definitely not normal. I didn't even know what I wanted to do by the time I was a junior in high school. I kind of felt a little bit out of place as far as not having made that decision until I was required to choose between home economics or industrial education. And industrial education in high school at that time was welding, auto shop, carpentry. And I was like, you know what, I will do that any day over going into home economics, because I was ignorant and didn't know that that had to do with much more than just cooking and baking. So I chose industrial education, and that year, instead of teaching shop, they taught architectural drafting. And that, coupled with my incessant watching of the Brady Bunch and seeing Mike as an architect, I put 2 and 2 together and thought, oh my God, maybe I can major in this in school. And when I was on my path to doing that, I actually ran into, I've had very low resistance to my career, but in college, before I transferred to the University of Illinois, where I ended up getting my degree, I was at another school, another state school, and I was told within our first week of class, the professor addressed everyone in class and said, okay, here's what you do, here's what you'll need to do to transfer into the architecture program. And I had a question. And by the way, I was the only person of color in the class, and I was the only female in the class. And my question had something to do with, number of credit hours or whatever. And he said, I'm sorry, this doesn't apply to you. You're not going to be able to transfer into the program. And I said, why? He said, because women just don't do that. And I know he meant women, especially women of color, don't do this. But that only fueled my drive, and I ended up going to the University of Illinois and matriculating through that program with a few hiccups, like not feeling that I was on par with the rest of the students, but speaking up and advocating for myself, going to my professor and saying, this is how I'm feeling. And he told me, basically, let us work on your weaknesses. You focus on your strengths. And I ended up graduating from the program, and I truly owe him my career. And as far as Perkins and Will is concerned, kind of the same thing happened. I was working on the international terminal out at O'Hare, and I was very good at computers. And back then, not everybody was using computers. And the designer wanted some fly-throughs over the apron of the airport. And I came in on a Saturday, did that. But I realized at that moment that my voice was not being heard, and I wasn't learning like Jesus. She wanted to learn construction. I wasn't learning how to put a building together. So I went to my boss Monday morning and said, I want to be transferred out to the field. I want to know and learn how buildings are built. And again, advocating for myself, which is one thing that I tell everyone to do. You have to speak your voice, and especially for yourself, because no one else is going to do it.
Tina, I love that the Modern Wing and the Obama Center and Terminal 5 at O'Hare have your grit and tenacity and Mike Brady and your rejection of home economics and some people who told you no to thank for, bringing you into fruition into this profession. We are a combination of so many experiences, but and there probably are a few other Mike Brady experiences out there.
That's really beautiful. Carlos, I know that you were born in Cuba and went to school at University of Puerto Rico. How did your journey get you to the United States?
I've always been a very independent kid, and I really wanted to sort of kind of explore the world, and maybe being kind of the grandson of an immigrant that went from Spain to Cuba, and my mother immigrated, and me, from Cuba. I think that notion of always moving has been in my blood. I went to the Midwest. I actually went to Ohio State, which is where I got my degree in architecture, my undergrad, and then later to Chicago for my master's. It was interesting. I was hearing some of the comments, and I now realize that when I was at Ohio State, I was the only Latino in the school. And if there were more, I never met them. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of an interesting thing. And, you know, I kind of reflecting on why I'm here today is like, I've always been very design oriented, as like others that mentioned, you know, I always wanted to be an architect, and I have always great passion for design, but I've always believed in design with purpose. You know, that's actually been something, and now it's more clear than ever. And, you know, it's interesting. I ask myself why, and it's because I feel that design without purpose is forgettable. And who wants to do forgettable work? And the other thing that I was reflecting on was that, you know, I was a very nice kid. I followed all the rules. I behaved, you know, I was not a troublemaker. But when it came to design, I've always been a troublemaker. And I was looking back and remember that when I graduated from Ohio State, my professors at the end of the year, they gave me an impromptu award, and I still have it. I don't have it here, I have it in Connecticut, but they gave me an impromptu award. And the award was called the Jose Marti Award for Revolutionary Architecture. And even from that age, I've always been the contrarian. I swim against the current, and, you know, I push for things that are maybe not easy to get, but meaningful. And I think that's why I'm here today.
Yeah. And that is your story, right? It wasn't easy for you to even get to the States, but you are here. And thank you so much, Carlos.
Thanks for your good trouble,
yeah.
Carlos. And Crystal, you know, someone described you to me as a fighter with a smile. And, you know, you've had some odds stacked against you, and yet you disarm people with your optimism and that beautiful smile, and your approach toward life has been, to life and design, has been so positive. Can you share a little bit of your origin story with us?
Yeah, so I think the fighter with the smile kind of goes back to, I'm a breast cancer survivor. Even though I look young, I was 27 when I had breast cancer, and, you know, it's been almost 10 years now. So that's probably part of my fighter with the smile, and still working through, you know, in our industry through the whole time. So first off, I feel honored to be on this call with all of you. I feel like all of you have been a mentor in some kind of way. But my background, I'm a Texan. I'm born and raised in Texas, started off in East Texas. And I was a Barbie girl. Like, I played sports, but I was also into Barbies. So, you know, having a single mom, you know, I wasn't able to get all of the things that I needed for my Barbie house. I got the dream house, but maybe there was some extra accessory I didn't get. So, you know what I did is I made it. Or I took my Sunday socks and I cut them up and made dresses for my dolls. So that was kind of my beginning of knowing that design was something that I wanted to do, and not knowing the aspect and not knowing the terminology of what an interior designer was or is at the time. And so I always thought I was going to be an architect. And then again, you mentioned I'm one of the younger people in the call. So it was the time of Trading Spaces and HGTV, kind of in the early 2000s, when I saw that term interior designer. And so seeing that term, I talked to my parents about it, and knowing that I wanted to go to school for it. And they actually went to high school with one of my professors who ran the program at Stephen F. Austin in Nacogdoches. So luckily I had parents who knew what an interior designer was, and that they were able to connect me with one of their old classmates who ran our program. So like Gabrielle, I was kind of focused at that point. So I only applied to one college. I only went to school for interior design, graduated in 4 years, and that's all I've done for the last 15 years is being an interior designer. I got registered in 2009 and knew that that was what I was gonna do too. So I'm one of those Texans that gets married at, you know, a child age. So I definitely got married young, thought I was gonna be finished having kids by the time I was 30. And then breast cancer happened. And so that definitely kind of changed my perspective on life. And so fighting with a smile has kind of been always my approach, and not saying no to any opportunities. So even things like this, like obviously I'm super nervous and inspired by the people that I'm with, but I'm never going to say no to any opportunities that are put in front of me. So I appreciate you guys asking me to be on this panel.
Crystal, your light just shines through, you know, you're kind of an amazing child. Yeah, yeah. And she said, I think I'm one of the youngest. No, you are the youngest, okay? Let's get it straight.
Cindy, a direction I think I'd like to take, there are a couple things. I want to come back to a remark that Mike made about validity. But before I go there, I'd love to ask, and this is open to the group, so anyone who wants to jump in with an answer. Have you ever felt in life and work that the odds were stacked against you? And that might seem like a really obvious question, but I want to know if there was a moment where you ever felt that the odds were stacked against you, and then how you circumvented or went right through those odds.
I think the odds were, I've always felt the odds were stacked against me, much like all of you on this call. In my undergraduate career, there were no African-American chemists, there were no African-American scientists. So let alone when I graduated and really went down the road of project management initially, there were no people of color, period. I couldn't find anyone that looked like me. And so what I really had to try and do was find mentors that were primarily men, not necessarily people of color. And so it really shaped the way in which I approach business and the way in which I engage with others. And that's a whole different conversation. But then kind of fast forward, I stepped out and did something most people would say was crazy 14 years ago. And I started a consultancy that does absolutely nothing except focus on the business of design and construction and I was determined to not copy somebody else's business model. I was determined to put my toe in the water and be fully committed to a better way of doing business and a better way of engaging. And so with complete blinders, I've always felt like it was stacked against me. What I think I've always had though, like everyone else on this call, is conviction. And being fully convicted that this was the road and the direction that I was going to go, that I was going to stay the course, that I was going to learn whatever lessons I needed to learn that were going to come along with it, and use that to make my life and the lives of other people better, and specifically people of color. But it has been one challenge after another. I think my approach to it though is to step back at some point and always ask, okay, what am I supposed to learn from this? And then go right back in and keep going. I just don't capitulate.
Brilliant.
I can share. Yeah, I'd like to share something. So when I read that question, I was like, stacked against you. To me, it sounds like victim and can't get out. And I never felt like a victim. I've always felt like that there were going to be challenges. I'm the only one in the room, will probably always be the only one in the room, so deal with it, right? And so I tried not to let other people's perceptions, negative perceptions or assumptions guide me. That's your problem, right? But that takes effort. It takes a lot of work. And so I found myself spending a lot of time in my career on that. And so couldn't see what's coming in the future. I could never create the future. And that's why I'm thankful for the few people that I've met along the way who nudged me in the direction that I've gone.
I was gonna just also add a little bit. I share the same feeling probably that most of the panel has in terms of always feeling, yes, that, you know, it's been a very difficult road to survive and to accomplish, you know, what goals you had put in front of yourself. So the funny part is, again, growing up in Iran, you would think the stacks were really against life, being a woman in a, you know, a segregated society. However, women, you know, we supported one another. It was all of us, and then it was this other side. So in order to protect one another, we always looked after one another. When I came to United States, I felt actually the challenges were much harder because not only there were no mentors in the schools of architecture, or at least where I was. I mean, literally, guys, we had no female professor. So then in education, I felt there was a disadvantage because no one was there to support you because you were almost like not visible in a way. And then, you know, in life, yes, you know, as I am about to graduate and go and in a way live in the beautiful country that raised me, there is a revolution in that country. And which made it very difficult to go back and work under a very kind of religious, strict regime that took over. So, you know, on and on and on is wherever you go, there are these mountains in front of you that you have to climb. And honestly, the only way, yes, I have also survived is by going back to the mission, to what you put in front of yourself and focusing in that, believing in yourself, and to have my sister as a support, as my partner, as someone that we, you know, move together has helped me tremendously and helped our business tremendously. I think ultimately I have realized is about trust in one another and trust in society that is going to be fair, and leadership. We still, I think today, need women leaders, women with vision like yourself, like Cindy. The only opportunity and a break we got very early on was Cindy Allen, out of the blue. I didn't even know who Cindy Allen was.
What?
Sorry, Cindy.
Thanks a lot.
In our 20s. Well, you called us and you said you're inducted in the Hall of Fame. We had built very little, but we were very hopeful. We were very much pushing every opportunity and every door. I think someone talked about this. Every little door that opened a little bit, you have to put your foot in there and push. And you say, you know what, give me the opportunity and we can show you. I think in general, minorities, women, and people, I would say, that are different or they're outside or come from outside in the United States do have quite a bit of challenge that they have to get through. And that's unfortunate because I think it's time, and that's why we are all here together to open that up and not allow that to happen again.
If you get to know both the sisters, you see what an incredible support structure you have, right? That relationship. And by the way, so serious about architecture. Moshkan is like, she cracks the whip, that's for sure. But the support is there. And so I guess the question would be for others, what kind of support systems have you had?
I came from, I was born and raised in Chicago and raised by my mom, who, was divorced from my father, even though he was still in our lives. But there was just one strong woman after the other. And my mother, my sister, my grandmother, my aunts, my great-grandmother, my best friends, they just, I never felt like I had these obstacles in my way that I could not overcome because of them and because I saw my mom do what she did. And just, I think she's just the most amazing person. I actually didn't realize that I was following her around the city of Chicago, literally moving like a block away from her. And right now in my townhouse, my mom is 2 townhomes over. And I rely on that strength. I rely on that support every single day. But I also want to say that I have found that support professionally. And it's with groups like this, these very women in this group, sorry guys, not just the women. I do find support with all genders, but it's been incredible to know that as you matriculate through your career, that you meet just inspiring people, and no matter their age, no matter their station in life, you find fuel in that. And I'm just eternally grateful for this, for forums like this, but for organizations, NOMA, AIA, AIAS. I mean, the students are incredible. And again, like Mavis, mentoring is a priority for me. But I just want to thank you guys for just being who you are and sharing yourself with others.
It's beautiful. Thank you.
Yes, Cindy, thinking about your question, you know, I actually realized that this notion of those people that set the bar high for you, you know, the people that you look at, you know, I look back and I think that people that got me through maybe all those challenges was knowing that my grandfather was a Cuban, you know, an immigrant to Cuba as a self-taught man that had nothing when he got there. And he built a business, and a successful business. Then my mother left Cuba with 2 kids, a widow, and nothing, and absolutely nothing. And she made it through. I always thought to myself, my problems are small compared to that, right? So if I cannot make it through, I'm a loser. So I think this idea that whatever is put in front of you, you got to make it work because others have actually had to do more of that. And I think when I also look back about my passion for teaching, you know, I taught for 26 years when I was in Chicago. And it's because I felt like I needed to do that for others, right? I needed to be the person that said kind of a great model for young students of design where they can see that, you know, that design is amazing, that design is inspiring, and you need to, you have to be that role model so they can do better than you, so they can actually surpass what you're doing. And I think that's super important. And probably why we're all here is because we need to make this real for a lot of other people that are watching and realizing, I want to be there. I want to be on that square talking to Cheryl and Cindy.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about
Right.
mentorship too, Carlos, and you were telling me the story about what, you know, when you came to the States and you were really insecure about speaking English and how you overcompensated and made it an advantage for you.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I think at the time I never thought that race was kind of the barrier for me. It might have been, but I didn't see it that way. It was something even more important. It was language. I really was unprepared to understand things well or even express myself. So what happened is I did a couple of things. I had to have other skills that others could see because I couldn't use language as that. So I ended up kind of trying to make the most incredible drawings that I could so the drawings could speak for me. And then the other thing was that I always took the most challenging assignments because I said, you know, nobody's going to notice me unless I do something that is really difficult. So I think this idea of always sort of realizing that you, maybe what you do is you say, I have to prove to everybody that I am also, that I deserve to be here. So.
I think that's kind of my story as well, Carlos, in not the language part, but having to prove yourself above and beyond that you deserve to be at the table. And, you know, I've encountered roadblocks along the way. I mean, started in the industry earlier than most of you, when there was a time when you would walk into a room and a hush would fall over the room because they just weren't prepared to see you. And, you know, what you do is you hold your head high and you keep moving forward and you don't let anybody squelch your dreams or your ability to prove that you deserve to be there. And that's how I've just kind of gotten through my career, basically, is to show and prove that this is what I do and I do it very well. But oftentimes you have to do it better than the next person that's sitting next to you in order for it to be really accepted. So there was a lot of that. There's not so much of that anymore, but in the beginning of my career, it took a lot. So it took a village around me to really help me get through that. So I made sure I would seek out people that were supportive of me, that, you know, were encouraging, and that's really what got me through. But like I'm saying, this group right here is amazing to have this happen today. You know, we're still having these discussions today, but at least we're discussing it, whereas we weren't before.
Right. You're so right, Mavis. The common thread that you mentioned, this notion of seeing the road and not the blocks, right? Carlos used the word conviction, and being really cognizant of who we are and our path. And I want to shift a little bit. I love the personal, but let's shift a little bit to connecting the personal to, you know, this common thread that we all share through the industry. We know that our industry has not been held high as an example of equity and diversity. And I don't want to necessarily turn it negative. I'd like to talk about the progress that we've made, but still the work that needs to be done. And, you know, because you've got global diversity in your title, Gabrielle, can I start that with you in a snapshot of our industry and maybe progress that you've seen, and talk a little bit about work that still needs to be done.
Right. So having that title for 7 years, I've been tackling this firm-wide, industry-wide, the whole nine. And we've made some progress. I would say today, I've seen more progress just in the fact that we're having a conversation with the word race in it. And having led this conversation for 7 years, that was still the one word, the one topic that everybody would just go, oh boy, here we go. And so I think that's some progress, but I forget who said it. It can't just be a moment. It's either now or never to really address what ails us as a profession. And I think we need to start with the work. How do we make purposeful work, as Carlos said? Who's designing what and for who? Because I have seen that, and that's actually why I wanted to lead this for the firm, because we were not culturally competent and we certainly weren't representative of all the communities that we worked in across the globe. So I think that's our biggest challenge. And I would hope that we can get past making the public statements and the commitments and the scholarships. That's all very good. But we need to change the way we design. And we need to change who's designing it.
And so the team matters. Who's on the team matters.
Absolutely. Now more than ever. And like I said, if we can't represent culturally, racially, gender, whatever, we must be steeped in research to be culturally competent to have that conversation and design authentically. You know, the 5 white guys going in to win a project in the Black community, unless they can really prove that they've done their research and they get it, it's not authentic. And I think it'll be irresponsible. It's been irresponsible. It's going to really be irresponsible. Sorry.
George, I inadvertently cut you off, and I know you wanted to say something. So let me call you out right now.
No, I think that it's something to be said about, I was thinking about Cindy's question of, you know, where did you find your motivation and how did you render that? I remember walking into Greenville 4 years in a row and being the only African-American there. I remember sitting there and like not feeling uncomfortable, but wondering like why I was the only African-American in the room. And I asked a few people, Rick, Fadrizi, a couple others, and you began to see things kind of move. And I remember also when sustainability wasn't a topic that was well spoken, like, and when you would show up, and I think my point is that my motivation was actually proving that I belonged, right? So being in the industry of providing interiors and materials, you know, if you know anything about the Deep South, you know, it wasn't a whole lot of welcoming when I showed up at Interface as an African-American in South Georgia or at Mohawk. Like, it was the only African-American in a leadership position around sustainability. There were days where you really had to take a lot of pride in being not the smartest person in the room, but not anybody knowing more about the project than me. So you had to have a holistic perspective. And I think for me, that was more of a driver to make sure that I was able to establish myself career-wise with humility and dignity and demonstrate through the work and the effort, and not through anyone thinking that I was chosen to be in that space for any other reason. So I think that that intrinsic desire that all of the people on this panel actually have to just share your story. And I think that one of the lessons that I've learned, and I remember meeting Crystal for the first time, and she was looking at me and I was looking at her, and we said, hey, what's happening, right? So we had this conversation and we opened up, we dialogued, we told each other stories. And I think sometimes those storylines that you may not even remember that you shared are also motivation for other people who are in that pathway. And so I think it's important for people to intrinsically have that thing inside of them, that why, that drives you for whatever reason to do this great work for people that you haven't seen and for legends that are legacies that are yet to come.
George, first of all, when you talk about what's inside of you, I just think about the first time I met you, which was actually when you were at Mohawk, and you were just beaming, you know? And so I just want to thank you, because that's how I remember you. That's how I remember you. And I just want to tell Mavis that breaks my heart to hear that story early on, because there isn't anyone as you're elegant and beautiful and so talented. And I'm sorry you had to go through that.
It makes you tough, and it makes you really, really stand behind your conviction. And it makes you stronger, actually. And because you just have that drive then to prove the world wrong, and hopefully I've been able to do that.
And Mavis, I got a little emotional when you were talking about that too, similar to Cindy. And I appreciate you guys all kind of paving the way for me to, again, I still am a lot of times the only one in the room, and it's more of my eyes are more open when I'm not the only one in the room. So George, that's probably why I gravitated to you. And Cheryl knows I ran up to her the first time I saw her, and she didn't blow me off. All of you guys, Gabrielle, we've really made a mess of some of those IIDA galas, being inappropriate sitting. It was her, not me. But but I do appreciate you guys paving the way, because it is something that I, as a millennial, getting to see people like you guys in leadership positions, and knowing that that is something that I can strive to be also. So I appreciate y'all.
I wanted to add on and support what Gabrielle was saying, because one thing that I noticed that has changed is when she was talking about being at the table, 5 white guys going in there is not going to do it. But community engagement is now kind of pushed to the forefront, almost to the point where it's a must do on projects, as well it should be, when you're bringing, especially for institutions that University of Chicago is a prime example. They used to build buildings on campus, beautiful structures, but they would turn their back on the community. And now there's more of a movement to bring the community to the table to help aid in the design process, so that they may not be a part of your design team, but they are part of the solution. They're part of the process.
We need to stay woke, and we need to listen, right?
Yeah.
The community before you can help anybody. You have to listen to what the community needs and bring
I also think, though, we can't think of it as an overlay, community engagement. We need to do it all the time and really understand that. And that's what I mean by being culturally competent. And really, you don't have an answer until you've met with that community, until you've partnered with that community, right?
I think I parallel it. Cheryl, the difference between cultural appreciation and cultural appropriation. I think as an industry, we've experienced and we've seen cultural appropriation when people who are not of color walk into communities and presume to know, and then design solutions based upon that lack of knowledge. What this conversation suggests is that we finally need to move away from doing that to true cultural appreciation. Like Gabrielle and Dina said, if we do not have a person of color to be at the table or in the room leading the design, then we do truly need to be aware and appreciative and understand, internalize the struggles, the challenges, the issues of the people that you are being asked to design for, as opposed to presuming that you know the answer. And that's the difference in terms of appreciation and appropriation. The other thing that I would say that, at least for me, from what I've seen, this changed, much like Gabrielle, I say that the policy statements are wonderful, but what I really want to see now is funded. I really want to see firms move beyond what they say they're going to put on pieces of paper and truly move forward to actually moving it off of a piece of paper from a policy statement to actually funding it and turning it into organizational change, true organizational culture.
Mm-hmm. What can we do as individuals so that Crystal isn't alone in that board meeting? I think about the young Carlos at Ohio State, and he was, the only one in his class. That, we've all had that experience of being either the first or the only, and it's a pretty damn lonely place to be, yet we've all done it, or the only woman, right? We've all done it, we've all been it. How can we ensure for this next generation of designers, of architects, folks in sales who want to work for manufacturers, what's our individual responsibility or obligation to make sure there are no more onlys?
With reaching out to, some younger institute like high schools and junior high schools, exposing kids to the idea of this profession at large, because I don't think a lot of kids really think about it as something they can, really entertain. And I think it's us going out there and, giving presentations and encouraging these young people to go into our profession, because I think that's definitely lacking.
Yeah, maybe I think that's the bullseye right there. I think we need to, the strategy, you can't put a Band-Aid on this. You actually have to go to the source. And the source is that design itself is actually a very elitist career to a degree, because it's foreign, because it requires incredible investment of time. And it doesn't always have the rewards that other careers have. And that's challenging, especially if you come from an underprivileged, community, or, from families that don't have means and you want to really do better. And we know that's been happening in the arts for some time. And there's incredible progress that is being made around this, because if you don't have more voices that are authentically wanting to be there from that diversity, it's never going to change.
Carlos, tell the story about when you were doing nonprofit in Chicago and what happened.
Yeah, I was working with this incredible organization in Chicago, and Cheryl, Marvin in Chicago. And one of the interesting thing was that that one of the reasons why Marvin is so fundamental into the reinventing the arts is that they provide art education to underprivileged kids. And by the way, it's like 90% of these kids go to college. Often they're the first family member that goes to college. And their mission is not just to teach them art. Their mission is to teach them that art is a career, that you can make a living and you can be really sort of transformative. The art institutions realize that they need to make this happen, because they don't have a future if this diversity is not embedded into this industry. And that is what we need to do for design. We have to do that. We have to show that you can get a job, you can do well, that you can actually transform the world, transform the communities, and those numbers will start creating incredible impact.
I was going to grab you, Mike. I know you've been trying to say something, and I have a question for you. How important is representation? How important is it for young women, young men, people of color to see someone who looks like them successfully practicing design or architecture?
Well, I think that one of the interesting things about kind of the way that I grew up is that I grew up in a community of Black people, even when I was in college. So to me, I always had that support even through that point until I graduated. And it wasn't until when I graduated that I realized, where's everyone else at? Where are people that look like me that are supposed to be here in the industry? Essentially overwhelmed with that Black culture from the start of my career until I graduated school. So when I did get out of school, there was a serious lack of representation. And it wasn't until I found that amazing representation, or those amazing people that helped build me up as a designer, I wasn't able to truly see my path. I was somewhat oblivious to some of the things that some other people might have seen. I always just saw it as a challenge. It was always a challenge. And I always felt that it was something that if I couldn't make it right, or if I couldn't do better, that was on me and no one else. And I didn't realize that a lot of those challenges that I had were because of race. I had to, and I just naturally pushed harder and harder in order to achieve the goals that I was trying to do. And it wasn't until later in life that I started to realize that those challenges weren't normal to everyone else. It was something that was a really big eye opener. But to what we were talking about before about seeing that diversity within our profession, it starts way earlier than college. It starts way earlier than high school. It starts in elementary schools and middle schools. It starts with the parents, right? I mean, how many times have we heard a story about someone saying that they would love to go into art or architecture or interior design, but their parents won't pay for it? Because guess what? They don't know that that is an industry for people of color to be successful in. So we have to reach out to the parents as well to show them the people of color who are doing these things and who are becoming very successful, and showing them that their children have a path for that. And it becomes very important for the community to understand that, and for you to rise as a community, because unfortunately there are spaces where people think that in order to be successful, you need to be a doctor, a dentist, a lawyer, an accountant, basketball player, or rapper. And we have to think beyond that. We have to be able to show people that there's more to it than that.
This also would make me believe that beyond all the discussion that we've had, early childhood, parents and all, I think our industry can do much better in recognizing diversity, diverse, intelligent, talented, designers. It's the media, and Cindy Allen has done an amazing job in that. And it's our industry with its awards. I mean, even up to date, how many awards goes to only a very few selected, old white male privileged, people? How many women have we? I think success, some of it is monetary, and I agree. I mean, when you see people making a lot of money, you want to, kind of pursue that, thing. But a lot of it is also what you see. As you said, if you see it, you can be it. And so when you see women, award-winning women who've built amazing projects, then you think, well, I can do that. I want to be that. The same way that now, we are facing in politics. The fact that now, for the first time, we may actually have an African-American Indian woman vice president is pretty amazing. This is how we can, I think, improve and go forward. Yes, it is true that we need to change our models of education. Even thinking about our models of design. I mean, the way we teach design in schools is still on the same kind of model that for thousands of years men have taught us how to design. I mean, if you want to start basic, we have to question everything. Why? Maybe that's not the only way or the appropriate way of designing and approaching a plan or planning. So, the history of the world in general has been, written by very few people. And they had to be, of a certain gender from Europe. Nevertheless, now that we recognize it and we understand that, I think I was reading this uniformity of thought is a debt of thought. This is a Time magazine, New York Times writer, Roger Cohen, who wrote in an article. It is true. if we all become one idea and one way of designing and one way of awarding and one way of recognizing, then there is no design. Our diversity and our unique voices and our unique points of view is what makes design go forward. And so to me, architecture and design, not only you need to recognize that diversity is the fuel of it and the fuel for the future, but I think we as leaders of the industry can do much better in searching and making sure that for, you know, everything that we do in terms of recognition and rewards, you know, we consider and find others. I mean, this is our job to find, you know, women, men of, you know, color, of different backgrounds, to be recognized.
Okay, so I have something to say on that. Okay, first of all, the reason why I inducted you when you didn't know me was because you were different and you were special. And I know Gisu for many years and love her to pieces. And she sits in that space where she and her sister have constantly gone up against men to build buildings. You know, they do a lot of interior design work because they're not, you know, building the museums that they want, although you're doing something really nice in China. But I just want to say that, you know, when I became editor, it was right at 9/11. And so the market crashed. And for me, I wasn't going to, you know, and interior design was primarily a domestic magazine. And I completely went overseas because we needed to see the great design. And we weren't having it during this recession. And it changed everything sort of for me, as well as, I don't know, like I think, you know, design loves every color of the rainbow. So like for me, I don't feel that the way you do, Gisu, but that's because I do believe that you are pitted up against, like, you know, strong, right? You know, architects that.
One thing that is really interesting about this conversation is that we're identifying that there's no silver bullet to this problem, that this is a multi-pronged, that we all have to activate ourselves in the areas that we feel we have influence. Right. Because the same way that we need recognition and the same way that we need visibility, I think I go back to what Mike was saying, you know, in this idea that we have to prove that this is also a great place for everybody. And, you know, there's a great organization, it's called SNAP, stands for Strategic National Arts Alumni Program. And one of the things they're doing is they're quantifying the fact that people that go to school for liberal arts and all those disciplines that a lot of parents might consider to be really not a great place to invest and for your kids to be happy, prove that they're data-based, and they are proving that the happiest people on their jobs are people that have liberal arts. They do as well as a lot of these professions like medicine and lawyers, especially in that kind of mid-level tier. And the other thing is that they are the best problem solvers, and companies need that because our training is all about abstraction and complexity. So that's the message that we need to get out there. So people can realize, oh my God, that's an amazing platform. I can do so much with that. And that's one thing that is going to help change the metrics around sort of, you know, the diversity around the table.
Yes,
I love Jesus' point about questioning everything. And, you know, there's that West African proverb that says, until lions have a historian, the history of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. And, you know, we need to retell our story. And even going back again to the academy, to education, we keep bringing up those infamous 5 old white men. I'm picturing these 5 white men sitting out there thinking, oh, they're coming after us again. The story of design is told in so many different ways that embrace humanity, not a segment of humanity, but all of humanity. And, you know, storytelling is our expertise. And I think we may need to rethink of how we tell the story of design.
I was thinking about it when you mentioned representation, Cheryl. I, you know, graduated from college in 2005, and I don't think I saw another Black interior designer until 2009, or met my first. And so I was wondering, in thinking about you guys, like, you probably didn't have any representation, but you still kind of push through it to become architects and designers. So we do have to get ourselves out there. Mike, you said everything that I wanted to say. I think it starts at home. I mean, and I like to say that I'm an interior designer because I'm not good at rapping. So that's why I'm an interior designer. But, you know, those are things that we all see out there in the media, you know, and then when I think about awards too, like Cindy, when we met the first time, you're like, well, why don't I know you? Well, I work at a small firm in Texas, and we don't have time to apply for awards or to submit our photos to Interior Design Magazine. And so, but that's something that maybe we need to make time for. So I think there are a few hidden gems that just aren't having the PR people or the marketing folks out there to actual business development out there to actually reach out to people like you or Cheryl to be part of these award situations. So I love that you just found some people too, you know, I love that. So I think that's the thing, is that we need to think about how we can bring those folks in, or maybe support them in putting themselves out there.
You know, the most fun we have, because so right now I'm judging Best of Year awards. I'm looking at over 2,000 awards from all over the globe. And they're, you know, and it's got to be 15 countries. And there is nothing like seeing a project that I never saw before from somebody I don't know who they are. It really, that to me is everything. And actually a lot of younger designers, and especially globally, that is how they get their name out there. They submit to awards. So it is a, you know what, Crystal, you make sure that your firm spends a little time to submit. It doesn't take that long.
But I think we have to think about this not as such an elite practice that we're doing and service that we're offering, but it's for everybody.
Right.
Everybody deserves to have a nice space. And, you know, when I think about the work that Samuel Mockbee was doing, and that, you know, just giving people a sense of dignity and, you know, a home, and, you know, that being more inclusive, I think, and I know that's a big proposition, but I think that's going to, we need to represent the world, the country, more broadly than we have been.
Mavis, this question comes up a lot from a practical standpoint. How can we ensure that we're designing the most equitable spaces possible?
I think it does have to do with listening to what the needs are of the people that you're trying to serve. You know, I think that before you go in with a drawing, you need to sit down and listen and meet with people and understand what are the problems that we're trying to solve. And I think not only will that help you partner with someone, they'll trust you better because they understand that you are actually there to help them and you're not just trying to impose something on them. So I think it starts with listening.
Something I never thought about, I was listening to a panel a few weeks ago. We had our Austin Design Week, and it mentioned, and one of the guys mentioned that us as people of color, we are super, like, we're relationship based. And I can see that, like, when you're saying we need to listen and kind of have that relationship with our clients. So some people just go in and, you know, have a design solution right away, but listening and having that relationship and that back and forth, I think is important, probably for most of us on this panel, but knowing that that's something that helps us to solve the problem better in the design world.
I was going to say, this brings it back to the beginning of this conversation, to that notion that used to be the time where community engagement was a choice, right, or an option. And now what it is actually where the projects begin. And if you really start the project by community engagement, by listening and realizing what's needed, I think that will guarantee, that becomes sort of the foundation that you build a project from. And that's where you create that equity.
And it's kind of odd that for us, that seems so natural. And I think it's because of the way we were taught. We were taught in school that this is an elitist. We're experts. We're the godlike saviors. We tell people what they need. And that's where this whole discussion has to start to change, is in schools. Because if we continue to teach in the Western way and not including any representation of architects like us, designers like us, cultures, you know, then this will just be a moment. And I do know that most schools are tackling this, and if they're not, they will be soon. I think the students of color are really challenging and demanding a new way of education. And we as practitioners should push those schools. This is the kind of people that we are going to hire. These are the kind of people that we want to build our practice around. So what are you doing about it?
Who do you want to hire next? Any of you? Who do you want to hire next? What competencies, what skills, knowing this post-pandemic world that we're moving into, who are you looking for? What's their skill set?
Black designers.
Yeah, we've been talking about reaching out to historically Black colleges. That's something we never really did when we were looking for the next group of interns. And, you know, why not? You know, why haven't we? I mean, I know that we are art school centric, you know, we have our favorites in the area, but we should be reaching out to a broader group of people. And if historically Black colleges are a good source for that as well. Mike, did you say you went to Howard? You attended Howard?
Did.
Yeah. So, I mean, you know, some great you know, come out of these schools. So
Howard, we're going to take you to Morehouse first, right?
Yeah, come on, George.
A little bit of a rivalry there.
So Cheryl, you asked a great question about competencies. And the Society of Human Resource Professionals identifies something like 52 different competencies. So I would be more specific. I want people who can listen. I want people who can be empathetic. I want people who have good judgment and understand client service and what it means to be of service to others. I want universities and colleges and institutions to understand that I need them to develop more than the skill of a student. I need them to develop the competencies of those individuals so that they can engage and interact in problem solving. And I think there's a dearth there that has to be addressed. That's a bigger conversation for a different day. Yeah. But those would be the real specific competencies that I would look for, that as I go into organizations all around the country, virtually, physically, those are the things that I continue to see that are missing. And we can cultivate the skills, but we've got to get to the competencies.
You know, as design firms are becoming more intradisciplinary, right? Because they are seeking those skills, and those skills don't necessarily have to come from someone that went to a design school, because the design is so much more complex. One thing that's really important about that is that if the argument is that the pool among designers of Black designers is small, then recruit Black people in all these other professions where they're probably incredibly equipped to bring not only their discipline, but also their perspective. And that should be a low-hanging fruit. So that's one thing that I always say is like, let's continue to build more interdisciplinary firms, and let's make sure that that's where we sort of bring all this diversity. Which, by the way, they also will be outsiders criticizing design from a very healthy perspective.
That's right. That's right. Cindy, I think that's our next conversation about preparedness and developing and nurturing and retaining diverse talent. Like, that's a whole other roundtable discussion.
Yeah, I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
Hey, Cheryl, this is Joe. One of the interesting scenario, I had a difficult conversation with an organization that's affiliated with flooring manufacturing. I'll just say that, right?
With what? With what manufacturing? Sorry.
Flooring manufacturing, and they were trying to find some alternatives, and we're going to create this competition and put money with it. Called out Stanford, MIT, Harvard. They kept calling out these schools they're going to send this to. And I said, well, why wouldn't you send it to Tuskegee or Morehouse or Harvard? And he was like, well, why would I send it to Tuskegee? I was like, you do know that George Washington Carver created paint from the peanut and sweet potatoes back in the 1800s. Like, they have to have some form of system where they have people there who can actually compete for the project. They have an architectural program, they have a design program, and they were almost ready to fund a program at the University of Georgia through this organization rather than these other institutions that already had programs in place. And so I threatened to resign from the committee. And that was the only reason that they would do it. But it was just interesting that how far the length that they would go for a simple competition to look at some alternative materials for a flooring solution was just like, it was not even in your mindset to do research enough to see which institutions could actually provide you with some of those solutions. And diversity definitely wasn't a part of the conversation. So ended up, they did the bid and Tuskegee won the competition hands down. But it was that you had to almost strong arm the committee in order to get them to even consider your organization. And sometimes it's lack of knowledge and sometimes it's lack of wanting to have that knowledge. And so have to do both and make sure that we keep things in the forefront in terms of that.
That's such a good example of you using your power and your influence. I think we all have to push our organizations to think broader, right? There's so much narrowness in our world and in the world. And I think it's our duty, it's our obligation as women, as minorities, as people of color to push. Like, again, I'll go back to what Jesus said, question everything and then push.
I agree. I think another topic that might be good for us too is, I know Gabrielle, you've been doing this for a long time, but how do you bring this conversation to the table within your organizations? You know, we've started gathering names and putting the word out there if we're interested in putting together a committee to talk about DE&I. And we've got people that are really interested, but, you know, without having somebody who's like, really has some experience, like a chief people officer or something like that. I mean, how do you really get the conversation going in a successful and productive way? And I think that that's kind of what we're struggling with right now. So that might be something we can talk about at some point in the future.
Davis, you've told me that TPG has always been pretty open and has been a diverse organization. What do you think some of that, where did that come from? How can you take something that you've learned from there to share with others?
Well, I think that's part of the issue. It's like, how do you share this with others, and how do you frame it in such a way that you can also bring other people within the organization along? You know, I think that it starts by having a diverse partnership. You know, we have a pretty diverse partnership, and you know, so it sort of begs for different points of view to be brought to the table, but I think that we need to take that further, and we're looking to take that further and expand it into a greater group, not just the partnership. And we found that, you know, we're not good at this because we haven't really had this conversation or topic before, you know, where we really had to act on it. And so I think, you know, I was going to tap into Gabrielle a little bit to see if, you know, there's a checklist or something that would be helpful to help us kick this ground. But I think that we have a pretty open and responsive partnership that is interested. We meet every morning at 8 o'clock on Zoom, and we talk about all kinds of things, not just business, but life. And, you know, this conversation comes up a lot, and everybody's interested in kind of getting better and being better and always growing and always thinking, getting ahead of the curve. And this time is ripe for that conversation, right? So
absolutely, now's the time. And
yeah, we acknowledge we need help.
And I'm glad to share with you whatever I can. I've spoken to many of our competitors and other firms and organizations who want to know how to get the conversation started. So I'm glad to spend an hour with your people or send you some information, but I think that's how it happens. I think having the conversation is absolutely number one. Even if you put your neck out there and say, look, this is where everybody's going. Mm-hmm. And if you're not doing it for the right thing, for the good thing, do it for the right reason, right?
Exactly.
You know, we have a 12-person firm, and I am majority owner of the firm, but I also have 2 partners that, you know, I love them. They're fantastic, but we've had to have, I wouldn't say difficult, not difficult for me conversations, but difficult for them. And I think now, like Gabrielle said, now is the time to do it. So every time I get an opportunity, of course, we're not in the office now, it's a little challenging, but just making sure that at every little aspect, for instance, our consultants, we were going after a project. There's a woman that I know who was vice president of a major global structural engineering firm who now has started her own firm. And she's minority and and minority and a woman. And I wanted to use her on a project, and immediately there was a pushback, but the conversation was had. The scope of the project, the scope of her services would have been very small on the project, thereby giving her an opportunity. And just having the conversation with one of my partners about it, he understood, just not giving up, just being persistent and making sure we do take advantage of this moment.
And if you look at it as you have to challenge the status quo from A to Z with what we do every day, ask yourself the question, is this going to get me to be more equitable, more diverse, more inclusive? The consultants, the clients you're working for, the policies that you're just accepting cold, like not, we're staying in our lane. Oh no, that's not mine. I can't do that. Well, we have to figure out where the barriers are and help not either tear them down or help not be part of the problem.
It's a difficult conversation to have on both sides of the table, right? For so long as a Black community, you didn't talk about those things and the problems that you had or the challenges that you face. You were always told that's just the way that it is as a Black person, and you just had to keep pushing on. So it's also a challenge for Black people to kind of talk about that. And we all have to be understanding that it is a difficult conversation on both sides, and that we have to work together. And if we don't have those challenging conversations, we will never get anywhere. And that's the reason why it's so important to talk about those things.
Yeah, Mike, where I was gonna go with that, and I think in a very similar vein, as Black people, we are more at risk for being reported to HR. We are more at risk for being, put on the spot at work. How, Gabrielle, I'm coming to you specifically again, how would you advise a young Black designer to either go to their studio director or go to their HR director when they see that a conversation needs to be held in their firm? How can they feel safe doing that, knowing that, 9 times out of 10, they're more at risk than perhaps other employees?
If there's ever a time to use your voice as a person of color or a woman or whatever, is now. Because the business as usual is changing. And so, and I know it's hard for young people to feel like they can say something, but we have to advocate for ourselves. And we have to call stuff, I was gonna say another word, we have to call it as we see it, right? And so we just have to speak up. And if you can't speak up, find somebody that you trust who can be your voice.
Yeah.
And you call me. I mean, it doesn't have to be even if somebody in the firm, but somebody to encourage you and walk you through it. I mean, that's what this is all about.
People have to understand what the power is of their voice. What you heard in Dina and having that difficult conversation was the recognition that she had power in the voice, not just shares. And even a young person who has a challenge within their own organization has a power in their voice, even if that voice takes them outside of the organization or to another allied who is willing to listen, and then not just help them navigate it, but might actually advocate with them for change. And I've seen a number of organizations have to take that approach because the young people are not supported internally. There aren't enough other people of color who understand. There isn't enough comprehension in order to be able to do that. So sometimes the best opportunity is to go outside and then come back in.
That's great. Karen, I'm going to co-sign that, power in your voice. George, I think you were going to say something.
I think that, on the flip side of that, also, as leaders in these organizations, we need to make ourselves available on our sweet spot when somebody comes to us. Sometimes we have to coach on things that are not your sweet spot, but you can give them the right questions, the right approach, the right format, how to present information, not to respond 24 hours in an email when you're pissed off, like all of those things that you need to coach people through so that they don't put themselves in a position where now they can't have a voice because they moved in the wrong direction because there was no one there to really coach them. Because most of the time you don't get a second or third chance. So just to try to position it appropriately and try to be a good coach. And that extends to being a coach outside. So I've had people call me from my competitors that were young sustainability leaders and other work, and they reached out like, hey, I'm hitting the wall here. I feel like I got a glass ceiling. You know, how would you approach me having this conversation? Who can I talk to? And sometimes it's just a matter of listening through. And if you've been through that experience, you can just kind of give them some pointers of how to build up your professionalism, how to have the right conversation, when to have the right conversation, you know, how to approach that, who else external can have some influence over that conversation, making yourselves available for that as an external coach. And I know we all are pressed for time, but, you know, once or twice a week, I get an inbox or an email, student or someone who's just asking questions. You just have to take time to scroll through on the weekends and take a couple minutes to respond and make yourself available.
Absolutely. So, hey, Cindy, you know, all of these people in these squares are, they're working, they're speaking, they're on panels. There are a couple on here, I can't even look at you all anymore because I've asked you to be on like 10 panels. And right, the road is long and it's difficult and we're working from home, we're tired. You know, there's a fair amount of exhaustion. And let's talk about wellness. Let's talk about emotional health with the little bit of time we have left.
Especially now when the conversation around design is about wellness. But hello, what about how is everybody really doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd like to add to Crystal's comment about what did you say, that you never say no? Part of my wellness is learning when to say no, and not overload like I always do, but also making sure I say yes to the right thing. Of course, always to Cheryl, always. But learning how to say no is one of the things that I try to do to help, or that my family makes me do to help relax me. Of course, tennis. I love tennis, but I hurt my wrist, so I haven't been able to do that. So I have to turn to other forms of movement, but the big one for me is learning when to say no. So Crystal, I know you're going to say yes to a lot of things, but just keep in mind you are allowed to say no.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
I want to also add to this. The pandemic and the COVID-19, we finally have learned how to kind of stay on our feet and, you know, ignore it by wearing our mask and, you know, doing the appropriate things. But I have to tell you, the most stressful thing for me has been the election, the presidential election, and the fiasco that we are still in. That, you know, threw me completely off, because I just could not believe that this country is still, you know, has so much issues with, you know, race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation. I mean, these are the conversations that we have to have without, you know, without even thinking about it being one-sided. We have to share and grow together. So anyways, that has been for me the most difficult beyond the COVID-19. But I have to tell you, what I have decided that maybe would be helpful is once in a while to just kind of, again, go inside yourself and do something that you always wanted to do, because now maybe there is less pressure, less you know, construction going on, less projects. And I'm going to promote this. I have been working on a humanitarian project, which is this belief that every human being has to have dignity by having a home. It's not acceptable to see homeless people worldwide, especially in the United States of America. It's not acceptable to see people who are leaving homes due to wars that they didn't cause, living in army camps. It's not acceptable to me to allow human beings suffer in this way. So bringing all of that out, I have finally, worked on this project to create something that in a way would be inexpensive and potentially easily affordable and transportable.
And on that note, Gisu, I think Cheryl and I, we were talking about that we always want to end on one last piece of positivity. Gisu, that's yours for sure. That no one should be homeless. So does everyone have one bit to share?
I can jump in and say something positive that I've done during this pandemic. I feel like whenever a big movement happens, art and music follow, and they do really play a pivotal role in how we see change and how we can expect change. I have started following a couple artists on social media that have been very inspiring. Kehinde Wiley, who did the portrait of Barack Obama. Kadir Nelson is another kind of very talented artist that has gotten me more involved in back to doing more portraits and sketching more outside of work. I think that has been the one thing that I think that is really interesting to see how art kind of changes as these big movements start to happen with like Black Lives Matter and such. And then the other thing is my grandfather. My grandfather is 94 years old, and every weekend I am at his house. And because he lives outside of DC, and I love driving out there to get away from the hustle and bustle of the city. And I thought that I would never be able to have this much time with him. And it's really great to kind of talk to him about his experiences and what he saw, and how he went through those things back in the 20s. So it's been very an enlightening experience for me to kind of understand my history and my culture a little bit better. So those are the things that have been really positive that I've been able to pull away from this, because I'm sure that if we were not in this pandemic, I probably would not have been able to have that much time with him, which is very special to me.
So I've always relied on art and music to get me through life in general, and it also inspires me. But now I've also added teaching myself how to play the harmonica. So I'll play you a song one day as soon as
Wow.
I love that.
That's awesome. I'm gonna chime in with Mike is that I have the opposite end. I have I guess he's almost 2 years old. So I've gotten to spend a lot more time with my son, who I wouldn't maybe have gotten to spend as much time with, and just seeing things from a child's eye. All of us are curious, and that's probably why we're in this industry. And so just seeing him figure out things for the first time has been pretty exciting. And those are things that I maybe wouldn't have gotten to do if I was working all the time.
I'm a huge Formula One fan, and I don't really have too many people to discuss Formula One with, and my mother and my sister both have taken it up just so that I could have conversations with them. But what's more important about this is that the 7-time world champion, Lewis Hamilton, is a Black man from, very meager means from Stevenage, I think, in England. And he came from very little means. His father worked multiple jobs to get him a go-kart that he purchased from the back of a newspaper. And this man has said, I am going to make my mark. Even from a 13-year-old kid, he knew what he wanted to do, like you, Gabrielle. He knew what he wanted to do, and he did it. And he was just crowned 7-time world champion, which is tied. It ties Michael Schumacher, a German. It ties his record. So he's on his way to breaking the record. But what's great about that is he's using his platform. His helmet has a Black Lives Matter fist on it. He's always wearing the Black Lives Matter face masks. There's something that people don't see when they show the races here, but there's always, we race as one by Formula One. He's gotten Formula One to change the way they look at the sport and trying to be more inclusive. Mercedes has changed the way the car looks. They've changed the livery to an all black livery for the 2 cars, but they're known as the Silver Arrow. So he's using his voice and he's inspiring people all over the world to do the same. And so it's not just I'm not just a fan of fast cars, but I'm a fan of what Lewis is doing with his position.
Yeah. Number 44.
Beautiful.
So like Crystal, though I don't have a 2-year-old, I have a 19-year-old who would normally be away at school, but she's not. She's in the dining room school. But it's the silver lining has been being able to spend quality time with her and really see her development, challenges and not, and so being there present instead of just getting on a plane, going somewhere that Cheryl made me go, or something like that. So that's been a real blessing because I have no hobbies. So
I think the family time has been the best part. Gabrielle and I laugh all the time that we have the same kid, just a different gender. So my 19-year-old son is in the dining room also doing school, and I wish he was away too. And then I have a 15-year-old. But I've enjoyed watching them grow and develop and really truly for the first time in their lives really experience an obstacle, because in their lives they really haven't experienced the obstacles, challenges that I had when I was growing up. And so to kind of see them navigate that space and place and really spend time with them, and them connecting to their grandparents too, who are also in their 90s. So that's been amazing.
So 2 things around the health and wellness thing. I picked up a new hobby, which is cycling. I bought me a nice expensive Trek bike, and I've been on the Beltline 3 times a week, and it's turned into a group of us who now go. And in all honesty, I don't know if Mike even knows this, but a couple of years ago, Mike and I had a conversation and we were talking about supporting our HBCUs. And I got mad at Mike after that conversation and went back and I started a committee with my fraternity to create an endowment at Morehouse, and it yesterday hit $500,000. So with the members of my fraternity, they committed to giving of their budget back to the school to create an endowment to give scholarships. And so we plan to be at $2.5 million in 3 years. So that's what I kind of committed to. Mike, I don't know if you remember that conversation. We were talking about Howard and Morehouse, and I was saying we need to do a better job of giving back. And you mentioned some things that you were doing, and I got mad. So I went back and started some good trouble.
I was about to say, that sounds like good trouble to me.
Yeah.
That's a good mad, if anything.
Absolutely.
Cheryl, what about you?
It's not the harmonica, but I am I'm taking piano lessons virtually. I played as a kid and then stopped, and so I've picked it back up again. Spending a lot of time with my own kids, kind of reattaching. I can't wait until they hopefully both come home for Christmas. And then Cindy, I'm a bookworm, so I've been not that I have a lot of extra time, but I am spending more time reading because I've been watching way too much Netflix. So but I've been reading the stories of composers' lives to kind of companion my taking the piano lessons. So maybe Mavis and I can team up, and at a Formula One race with Dina, we can give a hell of a concert.
You're on for that, for sure.
What about you, Cindy?
I keep thinking about my mom. So I just lost my mom. She was 95, and for 30 years she lived in India helping the poor. She was amazing. She's a great inspiration to me and the reason why I do believe in service. But I keep thinking about my mom, who took her last breath. It was Indian breath. And now she's in heaven and she's dancing because there's going to be an Indian VP. And it just gives me so much hope for the future. And it just touches my heart to be with all of you and also think about her at the same time.
Yeah. I think for all of us, even though the road ahead of us we know is going to be complicated, we're so blessed and so fortunate to do what we do, to be who we are, to have a platform and a position to offer representation and inspiration and the benefit of our experience. But as much as we're out there teaching and being examples, we're all learning. I think that's what inspires me so much about the group of folks on here. You all are consummate students as well. And I think that the profession is so fortunate to be graced by each one of you. And I am honored by the friendship of every single one of you, and truly thankful to each of you for sharing your hearts and your souls and your minds on this conversation. And Cindy, thanks to you, to Interior Design for partnering with IIDA and opening this platform. This is the first of many conversations.
Absolutely. And Cheryl and I were saying originally that battles are won through great coalitions, and you guys are a part of it now. That's it. It's official. and as Cheryl said, we look forward to more. So big virtual hug to everybody.
Yeah. Hugs to all.
Service Anam.
Wow, Cheryl, like what a conversation, huh?
That conversation leaves me breathless.
I know. They were also like open and generous and truthful and also positive.
The honesty and the bravery of every single one of those folks to share their moments, to share their memories, it was incredible. And so in taking that, right, I want to honor that conversation.
Me too.
I want to honor that conversation with action.
Right.
And
then you and I said, we're never going to do this unless we're not going to do it just to do it. We're going to do it because we want to make a difference, right?
And it has to stand for something.
Right.
And it needs to result in something.
Mm-hmm.
And so knowing that every single one of those folks we know has literally, I don't think I'm exaggerating, has fought for their right to be in this profession.
Yeah.
And they are intensely and intrepidly concerned about the next generation.
Mm-hmm.
And, what is it that we can do to help promote and celebrate the current generation of design and the next generation of design? And to that end, we're going to be debuting the Talent Collective,
Right.
which an effort between our two organizations that is all about illuminating, exposing, and celebrating the talent that hasn't always been seen or heard or acknowledged in our industry.
Right. And like we both, for actually lots of different reasons, are beyond excited about that. Like as an editor, that's all I want to do is expose talent, honestly. And that's what gets me up in the morning and gets me charged. This has a different kind of meaning, but certainly changing people's lives for the better in their career is something that we both has always been like close to our like DNA of
of what we do, right?
Yeah. And as a professional membership organization, typically IIDA is concerned with your work, but we're concerned with your life.
Right.
And we want to affect you in a lifelong way. And so what the Talent Collective is going to allow us to do is gather talent out there, as I said, that hasn't typically been seen or heard. And whether it's for an employment opportunity or whether it's for exposure in Interior Design Magazine, talent that hasn't always been seen or acknowledged or realized. Manufacturers or firms will be able to look at the Talent Collective as a resource when they say, I need to find a Black or brown designer. I need to find a designer under the age of 25, because so many people don't get that exposure for whatever reason. And
for whatever reason.
The reason isn't always a malignant reason.
Right. No.
It's just there is a lot of talent out there, but depending on where you are and where in your work, you may be from the tiniest firm, right? In Fargo, and you're not necessarily coming across those folks.
Right. Like Crystal was saying, who's like in a small firm, she said, we don't always, we don't actually submit for awards competitions. And
That's
I'm
right.
like, but you should. You should spend the time and do it, because you know what? It'll expose you in a way that you hadn't before. So there's a lot of ways to educate people, but also by creating like a new structure to help people feel like it's okay.
Yeah.
That honestly, it's going to be good for you, for me, for them, for the community. It's all a positive.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just a new way to look at how we recruit talent, how we retain talent, the ability for folks to be able to tell their stories, expose their portfolios. It's going to be an exciting, really structured way. I can't even begin to figure out the technology, but thank goodness we know people.
There's that.
We know people who can do that.
Right.
But it's a pipeline for people who maybe haven't always had a pipeline extended to them.
Right. We're going to find a new pipeline for them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. We want to make it less hard for people to be where they need to be and to be seen where they need to be seen.
Right. And it's going to explode. It's going to be like fabulous. Right. And we're going to be like, yeah, we did that.
I think, Cindy, of all of those designers that we don't know yet, who will be gathered and convened within the Talent Collective and will have their work and their lives promoted. And it's going to be an amazing legacy for the magazine and for IIDA. And so many people are doing so many things, and I admire and support that, but I'm glad that we have identified something that just resonates for both of our organizations.
Absolutely. So we have a lot to look forward to next year. First of all, getting out of 2020.
Yes.
And then our DesignUnity initiative and our Talent Collective. I mean, you can't get much better than that, right?
You cannot. It's real, it's human, and it's going to work.
It's going to work.